Quick recap for you at the bottom of the hour. It's 11:30 Eastern now. 2 hours and 15 minutes ago, we should have seen the shuttle Columbia touch down gracefully for a landing at the 15,000-foot runway at the Kennedy Space Center. Instead, on its 28th flight, the 113th mission in shuttle history, the Space Shuttle Columbia broke up mid-flight over Central and East Texas at an altitude of 200,000 miles plus, in excess of 6 times the speed of sound. The pictures that we've been showing you are dramatically tell the tale from our affiliate WFAA as it broke into numerous large pieces. Those are those bright points followed by distinct trails behind them, sort of like multiple comets or meteorites, traveling faster than a speeding bullet at that point. Crew of 7 was finishing up a 16-day science mission, which went off pretty much without a hitch. And right now, search and rescue teams are fanning out all across Texas, searching for debris. And as a matter of fact, we have a piece of debris which one of our viewers sent to us from one of the counties there. You'll see it right in the middle. If you see something like this, folks, please don't touch it. Please don't touch it. Just leave it there and try to keep others from touching it. Call the authorities. It's going to be a big debris field over a huge, huge area, multiple pieces, huge area. And in the interest of your own personal safety, you are implored to leave it be. We have with us Suzanne Malveaux, who's at the White House. The president is en route back to the White House. We're expecting, by the way, a news conference from NASA, Kennedy Space Center. And we hope to get that soon. But in the meantime, Suzanne, can you tell us, you've had a chance to talk to some people inside the White House who've had access to the Situation Room and what's going on. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you a senior administration official assures us, and he says, I'm quoting here, there is no reason to believe, no indication that this is terrorism, that they are fully investigating the matter, but a senior administration official reassuring the American people, saying there is no indication that this is terrorism. We did speak with Scott McClelland. He is a White House spokesman. He gave us a TikTok, the details of how this unfolded before the president, that he was notified by Chief of Staff Andy Card immediately after NASA lost contact with the shuttle. Also, Dr. Condi Rice was notified, as well as Vice President Dick Cheney, Secretary of State Colin Powell, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, as well as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Myers. We are told that the president did speak with NASA's Director O'Keefe at 10:30 this morning, that they will continue to remain in contact, but they have had an initial conversation about what is taking place. The decision was made that it would be best that the president return here to the White House to continue to monitor situations. They say that they are still gathering information at this time. We have also learned, as well, is that Governor Ridge, who is now Secretary of Homeland Security, that he has made a number of calls, that he has reached out calling the governor of Texas, Governor Perry, also calling officials from Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Louisiana, that all regarding possible falling debris, that he wanted to make sure to touch base with all of them to let them know of the dangerous situation. As you know, we've been hearing from NASA officials all morning on that. We have also been told that the White House has been in contact with Israeli officials, not the president, not on that level, but certainly U.S. officials in contact with Israeli officials regarding that the one person who was on the shuttle, an Israeli citizen. All of this unfolding, the president, of course, taking this very seriously, very concerned about it. We are expecting him to arrive back at the White House shortly, where, yes, he will be conferring with his Chief of Staff, Andy Card, Dr. Rice, among others, to monitor this situation. And they're very concerned, and they say that, yes, this is unfolding, but everybody is fully aware of all of the information as it comes in. And again, a senior administration official emphasizing this morning, and I'm quoting here, there is no reason to believe that there is any indication that this is terrorism. Miles.
Suzanne Malveaux, that's worth underscoring. We got to remember the altitude and speed at which the shuttle was traveling at the time of the breakup. 200,000 feet, 6 times the speed of sound. It's pretty hard to conjure up a terrorist or any sort of way of reaching it if terrorism is your thought. But we do have to address that issue in this day and age, so we do. Let's take a quick look at the map. And this is, I've been calling it Central Texas. It's really East Central Texas. As you take a look at the map, this is the area, Palestine, Nacogdoches, St. Augustine, these are the areas where we've been hearing about debris. Now, as the shuttle came in across this way, traveling fast, traveling high, that debris field is apt to be just staggeringly huge. So, and it's also likely that there's an awful lot of small pieces. So we're going to underscore that point one more time. If you see something, don't touch it. Ed Lavandera is right near a piece of debris. He's in Corsicana, Texas, which isn't too far from Dallas. Ed, what are you seeing?
Well, Miles, we are driving along Interstate 45 headed southbound out of Dallas toward the Palestine and Nacogdoches area. And we have come across the first location where we've seen what appears to be some sort of piece of debris that has been smoldering for some time now in a wide open field, brown dirt all over the place. And we see a group of people. We're about the people in this debris is about 300, 400 yards away from the interstate, so it's hard to really make out what exactly is going on over there. But
Im Augenblick gibt es noch keine neuen weiteren Informationen. Wir haben hier eine direkte Bildleitung zur NASA. Dort hätte vor etwa 10 Minuten eine Pressekonferenz beginnen sollen. Die hat noch nicht angefangen, also auch noch keine weiteren Informationen, vor allem natürlich über mögliche Ursachen, über die spekuliert wird. Der Präsident ist auf dem Weg zurück von Camp David, wo er das Wochenende verbringen wollte, ins Weiße Haus. Er müsste da jeden Augenblick landen. Von ihm wird er wird sich da mit seinen Beratern treffen. Er soll mit Israels Premierminister Sharon telefonieren. Ob er sich äußern wird, das wissen wir im Augenblick auch noch nicht. Also im Augenblick keine neuen Informationen, vor allem auch keine Informationen über mögliche Ursachen. Die Trümmerteile, die weit verteilt sind, in zentralen Texas niedergegangen sind, die werden nach und nach gefunden. Suchtrupps der NASA sind unterwegs und die Bevölkerung wird aufgerufen, über Radio und Fernsehen diese Teile doch bitte schon nicht anzufassen, weil das auch gefährlich sein könnte, weil sie kontaminiert sein könnten von Treibstoffresten der Raumfähre. Das ist im Augenblick der aktuelle Stand.
Und Eberhard Pilz, wenn ich Sie richtig verstanden habe, es gibt keine Hinweise auf irgendeine Form von äußeren Einfluss für die Katastrophe.
Nein, bisher gibt es dafür überhaupt keine Hinweise. Es gibt eine Information vom FBI, die sagt, dass eine solche Möglichkeit von Sabotage oder Terror im Augenblick, dass darauf nichts hinweist.
Vielen Dank nach Washington, Eberhard Pilz.
Clearly, people walking through this field, and this isn't a field that you would walk through by any means. Protecting that area, a lot of interest, onlookers from the interstate stopping to see what was going on. And Miles, you mentioned just how huge this area is. We've been listening to radio reports throughout the morning as we've been driving, and there are reports coming in from all over East Texas, from Marshall, which is very close to along Interstate 20 near the Louisiana border, all the way down south to Nacogdoches. We're talking several hundred miles in a huge swath of land through East Texas that these reports have been coming in through. So this is the first little piece of debris that we've been able to see, and as we continue to drive toward Palestine, we've had indications that there are more reports and more debris that has been found from Palestine into the Nacogdoches area as well. Miles?
Ed, can you describe the piece for me? Are you close enough to have a sense of that?
No, it's so hard to see. You can tell that it was a dark piece of debris, and unfortunately, that's why I was describing the dirt. It's very dark dirt soil in this area. So all you could see was something kind of sitting on top of the soil there, some piece of debris, and it's hard to describe what it might have been. But it was distinguished because you could see the smoke coming from the debris as well, and you could also see a group of about 6 or 7 people in the distance, almost guarding the area.
Ed Lavandera, who is on the road in the midst of that debris field. We conducted some extensive interviews with the 7-person crew of Columbia before they left, and hopeful that we can share some of that throughout the course of this. And I believe we have some more of that ready. I don't know who we have ready in the queue and ready to go. Maybe you can give me a sense of that in the control room. All right, Willie McCool. Willie McCool was the pilot, first-time flyer, United States Navy, and a commander in the Navy, used to carrier landings and flying the EA-6B. Here's what he had to say before he left.
For me, it doesn't really affect me because I'm just so focused on the mission and the training, and gosh, I've got a Navy background. I've been flying off carriers and doing night landings and dealt with pitching decks in bad weather. So you just kind of get immuneness, in a sense, to the environment around you, and you deal with it. And that's pretty much my attitude with regard to the 9/11 events. And I guess I have more concern maybe for my family. I just want to do everything I can to put them at ease. And I know that NASA has done a wonderful job in coping with the necessity for new security measures, and I think they've done a good job in doing that and have given comfort to me and my crewmates, and in particular our families along those lines.
Tremendous concerns about security before this mission launched because of one occupant in particular. I mean, every shuttle mission since 9/11 has had added security, just like everything else we've encountered in our lives since 9/11. But in this mission in particular, one occupant put the security measures really over the top, unprecedented in the history of NASA's shuttle missions, 113 of them since it began in April of '81. The reason, one occupant, citizen of Israel, the first Israel ever to fly in space, Colonel Ilan Ramon. And really, I don't think people here in the United States are as aware that he was a true hero of the state of Israel. Let's go to Heidi Collins, who has more on that.
Thanks, Miles. Going to try to help you out a little bit here. We want to tell you about Ilan Ramon. As Miles was just saying, he was the first Israeli astronaut, 48 years old, and just as tragically as for the rest of the astronauts who had family, he was a family man, a father, a husband, and 4 children. And the Israeli embassy has now sent a small team to Florida to be with Ramon's wife and her children, and also his parents are there as well. As you can imagine, the feelings that they must have, along with the other families standing by at Kennedy Space Center awaiting the arrival and the landing of this shuttle Columbia. We are going to go now to Kelly Wallace, who is standing by in Israel to tell us a little bit more about the background of Ilan Ramon. Kelly?
Well, Heidi, as you can imagine, tremendous sadness going through the entire country of Israel as these events are unfolding. We do have some reaction from Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, his office issuing a statement a short time ago. The statement saying, quote, "The government of Israel and the people of Israel prayed together with the whole world for the safety of the astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia." The statement going on to say the state of Israel and its citizens stand at this difficult hour with the families of the astronauts, Colonel Ramon's family, the American people, and the U.S. government. As you said, Heidi, a small team from the U.S. Embassy in Washington going to Florida because that is where Colonel Ramon's wife and his 4 children are. They were there, of course, awaiting the return of the Space Shuttle Columbia. We know that Colonel Ramon's father, though, here in Israel, in fact, he was watching or was at an Israeli television station. We understand he was there to watch the events unfold, to watch the return of the space shuttle, and then, of course, he watched the events on television. We believe Colonel Ramon's father has since left that station to return to his family. Now, Colonel Ramon, really the pride of Israel, an Air Force colonel with more than 3,000 flight hours. He has a distinguished career. He served in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. He also was part of the mission back in 1981, a mission to bomb a nuclear reactor in Iraq. We have colleagues going around Israel talking to people here. As you can imagine, tremendous shock on the people, from the people of Israel on this night.
We're a very depressed country at the moment with the impending war in Iraq, the intifada, the political problems that we have. I think this is going to hit Israelis quite hard because it's very personal. Yeah. The wife has been interviewed. We know the kids, the kids are known in their classes and in schools. It's very personal. It's a very personal loss for everybody. I'm very upset.
A very personal loss, Heidi, indeed, because, when Colonel Ramon took off on the Space Shuttle Columbia, it was front page news in every Israeli newspaper, live coverage on every Israeli television station. This, after all, the first Israeli astronaut in space but also put this in context. This is a country experiencing a great deal of violence. More than 2 years now of the second intifada against Israel, more than 80 suicide bombings, tremendous violence, the economy really in a devastating situation right now. So lots of bad news. A lot of people looked at Colonel Ramon and his mission as some good news, really in a sea of very difficult times. Back to you, Heidi.
That's right, Kelly, and obviously Colonel Ramon, lots and lots of experience to finally get to this day, which is seen amongst the flying world as quite an honor to become an astronaut. It takes very hard work and a lot of hours. He was an F-16 pilot, more than 1,000 hours in that plane that we are familiar with, of course, in this country. He also took place in the 1981 bombing of a nuclear reactor in Iraq. So once again, payload specialist on this mission, 48 years old, father of 4, and obviously a devoted husband. I want to go ahead and go now to another reporter that we have standing by at the Kennedy Space Center, Grayson Kalm of Central Florida News, standing by to tell us more about the situation there. Grayson?
Hi, we were expecting a press conference with the media representatives here at the Kennedy Space Center. We've actually been moved from the shuttle landing facility to the central part of the Kennedy Space Center at the media site. We were expecting a press conference at 11:30. That has come and gone. We are told now that NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe is on his way here. As soon as the head of NASA gets here, they say that's when they will hold a press conference and give us any more information than they have been giving us. Even though we are right here with all of the press people who are coordinating all this, we know a little more than you guys have heard there in Atlanta and everywhere else. It has just been a day of trying to piece together information ever since we waited for the shuttle to land, and it never came. So right now, you go into the media center and you've got people on 2 different cell phones and a regular phone trying to coordinate this, trying to bring it all together to give us some idea of the latest information of what they have. But right now, it's been very sketchy.
All right, Grayson Kalm, thanks so very much for the update from Kennedy Space Center. Too, we want to make sure that we remind you about something that Miles O'Brien has been talking about all morning long. Very, very important for the people in the debris field, which, as we've mentioned, is absolutely huge across Central and East Texas. There are 2 chemicals, 2 main propellants that may cause a serious danger if you get anywhere near them. Let me just tell you what they are: nitrogen tetroxide and monomethyl hydrazine. These are very, very dangerous materials to the touch even. So if you are curious, if you are seeing a piece of debris on your land or on your property, do your very, very best to stay absolutely as far away from it as possible. Report it to authorities and make sure that you do err on the side of caution from this. We're going to send it back over to Miles O'Brien now, who's standing by to tell us what he knows. Miles. Thanks
very much, Heidi. Appreciate that. Probably can't underscore that point enough for you. It would just compound a terrible tragedy if somebody were to be burned or disfigured in some way by hydrazine, which is in particular very, very volatile, ultimately cancer-causing substance. And both that and the nitrogen tetroxide can burn you just to touch it. So don't do it. Just stay away from it and help the authorities in all of this by letting them know where it is. We have with us on the phone line Michael Vaughn, and Michael was in charge of this. He's actually with us live. He was in charge of the Situation Room back 17 years ago this past week, when on the day of what should have been the State of the Union, the Challenger exploded a little more than a minute after liftoff. Anybody who was around then remembers that harrowing day, the decision to actually cancel the State of the Union address that night by Ronald Reagan. Michael Vaughn was there. Tell us, if you could give us a sense, sort of paint the scene for us in the Situation Room at times like this.
Well, it comes as a shock to the duty officers, just as it is a shock to people at home. When I was there sitting at my desk watching the Challenger lift off and saw it explode, it was an extraordinary shock, and the first thing I did was ran upstairs and tell people about it, and that's probably what they did today as they heard about it. In 1986, CNN wasn't quite so nimble as it is now, and we actually had to make phone calls to find out what was going on. And we called the Johnson Spacecraft Center and the Kennedy Spacecraft Center, and the emphasis at that time...
You know, I've got to interrupt you just briefly, sure, Michael, because we're not making clear what we're seeing right at the screen. That is file tape from 17 years ago. That's Challenger. That has nothing to do with today's events. Okay, go ahead.
Today's events, quite similar to then. the first thing the Situation Room does, and its primary duty is the President's Alert Center, is to find out what happened and tell people about it. With us, it was quite easy because they were upstairs. With them, they had to make telephone calls to presidents at Camp David. But since it's a domestic issue, they call both the White House staff as well as their boss, the National Security Advisor, and let them know that something has happened. After that, the emphasis is what happened and are there any survivors. In both cases, it's hard to believe that there were any survivors, but that's what first comes to people's minds.
And give us a sense, I guess what might be different this time around, 17 years after Challenger, what might be different is the specter of terrorism. Certainly terrorism existed back then, but it wasn't on the forefront of our minds as it is today.
Absolutely. In fact, they probably have that right on top of their checklist. Any time anything happens, is there a connection to terrorism? And if so, how can I find out about it? Because people will start asking those questions. Absolutely. And that's what makes everything different today than it was then.
Take us through those hours, though. I'm sure it's all a bit of a blur to you. And the response and the confusion which inevitably follows something like this.
Let me tell you a little bit about what happened in 1986 and then shift it over to today, and because there's quite a few parallels. At that time, shuttle liftoffs were routine. The networks didn't cover them. You didn't see Walter Cronkite anymore at the beach. But CNN was there, and we were in the sit room watching the liftoff and saw the explosion. And the Situation Room is really geared towards international events, but clearly certain domestic things require their attention. So I ran upstairs from my office in the sit room and broke the basic protocol of White House behavior. I opened doors without being asked to enter, or opened doors without an appointment. And I started with John Poindexter, the National Security Advisor, and I just stuck my head and said, the Challengers exploded. We don't know what happened. I went then next to...
Michael Vaughn, stand by 1 second. We got a dispatch from James Hartsfield in Houston.
Sure.
Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. That statement will be broadcast on NASA television live, again beginning at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. A media statement by NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe. A space shuttle contingency has been declared in Mission Control. Flight controllers continue to secure information and data and all notes pertinent to Columbia's descent from orbit this morning. Communications with Columbia were lost at approximately 8 a.m. Central Time as Columbia flew above north central Texas at an altitude of approximately 200,000 feet and a speed of 12,500 miles per hour. Mission Control had no further communications or tracking with Columbia following that time. Search and rescue teams in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and in portions of East Texas and along Columbia's planned route toward the Kennedy Space Center have been alerted to the space shuttle contingency and are actively at work. The location of any possible debris should be immediately reported to local authorities who will be in contact with NASA and Air Force search and rescue personnel. Any debris that is located may be hazardous and should be avoided due to the toxic propellants used on board the space shuttle. Again, a press statement and availability by NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe.
All right,
is scheduled.
We've been listening to James Hartsfield, Public Affairs Officer in Houston. He's sitting in one of those consoles there. I don't know if you noticed during that shot, there were a lot of boxes, look like moving boxes. One of the things that is part of the protocol here is to gather your notes, gather all your documents, all your data. All of that is sealed up, put in boxes, and ultimately will be the focus of a commission that will look into exactly what's going on here. But you see the various positions. They're picking up notebooks and documents. Preserving data is the key here. Capturing what's on the screens, printing out notes in order to capture exactly what happened in those final minutes of the Space Shuttle Columbia. 1 p.m. Eastern, Sean O'Keefe, the administrator of NASA, a little more than a year into his job, will address the nation from the Kennedy Space Center. We, of course, will bring that to you live. Okay. I guess, given what we've been reporting to you and showing you all day, what I'm about to tell you is perhaps obvious, but what senior officials are telling us is confirming what we've seen, which is that the shuttle is, quote, gone. Let's leave that at that. Michael Vaughn, we were talking about the confusion and what happens in the hours subsequent to these kinds of things and how the government pulls itself together. Take us inside that once again.
As I was mentioning to you, I simply ran upstairs when the Challenger exploded and threw open the doors and told people, went from Poindexter to Vice President Bush to Don Regan, the Chief of Staff, and then we all ended up in the Oval Office, watching CNN run those pictures of the Challenger explosion over and over again, just as you've done today with this shuttle. Then it was a question of finding out what happened, and it's a matter of getting on the telephone and finding out from NASA what they thought had happened. Did they know anything about survivors? What caused it, all that sort of thing. And there was just an incessant stream of questions from upstairs about all of this, and what we tried to do was gather that information as fast as we could. The same thing happened today. The duty officers probably saw it first on the news, heard about it from NASA, and immediately notified people right up the chain, and immediately started making telephone calls to find out what had happened. In the case with any crisis, a bolt from the blue, the government's the first action you have to take is get everybody up to speed on what happened, so everyone has the same level of information. What happened, where did it occur, that sort of thing, and then go from there. With respect to NASA, it's just a question of getting on the phone. With other kinds of crises, you have to call upon many, many sources of information to get that information.
Michael, if you could tell us then, just recounting, when it became, I think we probably, as you put it, CNN's a bit more nimble now. I think we have a clearer indication earlier on. It was many, many hours, as I recall, after the Challenger explosion before we really had a sense of what happened.
It was. Time is more compressed now. What I did was I invited the administrator of NASA to come over to my office and use it as his command center, because the rest of the government didn't have those facilities as they do now. And he came over and we helped him draft some statements and make telephone calls. And we got Johnson and Kennedy spacecraft centers on a speaker box on the telephone, and they relayed real-time information to us as they acquired it. And then we would pass it upstairs.
Michael Vaughn, formerly in the Situation Room, and who happened to be there on January 28th, 1986, the day the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded some 70 seconds after leaving the launch pad there, killing all 7 crew members in that case. 17 years ago this past week. Let's get Cliff Johnson on the line. Cliff Johnson is an assistant to the governor of Texas, Rick Perry. Cliff, what can you tell us about the effort to preserve the debris field and perhaps more importantly, keep people away from any debris?
Well, we're watching the debris field. Evidently, this went from Navarro County, Corsicana, through Anderson County, Palestine, over to Cherokee County, through Nacogdoches County, over to San Augustine County. We have about 20, 25 pieces of debris field. The biggest that I've been reported is anywhere from 3 to 4 foot square. We've had a few calls in on some small fires, nothing that couldn't be controlled. We have some folks reporting the smell of some kind of propellant, and so we're telling everybody to be very, very careful. We're securing all those sites, and we have the local fire department, local DPS, state troopers, the sheriff's office, the police department. Everybody is securing these sites, and we're building a list of those sites in the Palestine, the county seat of Anderson County, and the Anderson County Sheriff's Office as we speak.
How big a debris field, Cliff, have you been able to sort of pinpoint?
Well, from what we can tell, it runs all the way from the northwest to the southeast through, starting in primarily at I-45 at Corsicana, Navarro County, all the way through Anderson County, all the way over to the Louisiana border. We're getting reports that maybe Nacogdoches County and San Augustine County took the brunt of it.
And I'm sorry, I'm not familiar enough with Texas geography to get a sense of how many miles it is. From I-45 to the border is what?
Well, I would guess as a crow flies, probably anywhere from 120 to 150 miles. We're 60 miles from Nacogdoches, from Palestine, and we're about 60 miles to Corsicana going back to the west. So you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to 150 miles from Corsicana probably to the Louisiana border.
Okay, huge area. And do we have any reports of injuries on the ground, either from impact or from people who pick something up that is toxic?
None. We have no reports of injuries whatsoever.
All right. Cliff Johnson, let's hope it stays just that way. Cliff Johnson is an assistant to the governor, Rick Perry, in the great state of Texas, where they have a huge, huge debris field. We're talking about an area that spans 120 miles. Let's bring people up to date at the noon hour Eastern time. We should have been, at this point, showing you about a 20 or 30 second clip of the Space Shuttle Columbia landing about 9:15 a.m. Eastern time. That's when it should have touched down gently at the Kennedy Space Center, the 3-mile-long runway there. Instead, we've been showing you this, which is the final moments of the Space Shuttle Columbia. The old gray lady of the shuttle fleet, as some call it, perhaps not indicative of its condition, however, as it broke up over north central Texas, altitude of 200,000 feet at some 12,500 miles an hour, faster than a speeding bullet, quite literally. Mission Control lost contact with the orbiter about 15 or 16 minutes prior to its anticipated landing. Now, the landing scenario begins literally over the Indian Ocean with a deorbit burn. It's an incredible glider ride, braking glider ride, all the way halfway around the planet to the Kennedy Space Center. Tremendous stresses induced on the orbiter as it bleeds off speed and trades speed for heat, quite frankly. 20,000 tiles are on the outside of a space shuttle in order to protect its aluminum frame from that heat in excess of 2,000 degrees, well beyond the melting point of aluminum. 7-person crew was on board, commanded by Rick Husband, a colonel in the United States Air Force, on his second flight, his first as commander. There's the remainder of the crew. If you put it in the telestrator, I'll help people see who's who. And there's Rick Husband there. His pilot was on his first flight, and he was a commander in the United States Navy, William Willie McCool. Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli ever to fly in space. And I'm listening to NASA for just a moment. He's repeating that we're going to get a news conference at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Michael Anderson, mission specialist who was on his second flight. He flew to the space station Mir in 1998. Kepalana Chawla, who was born in India and is a naturalized American and for fun flew gliders and flew also before in 1997, operating the robot arm of the shuttle for a experimental scientific mission. Laurel Clark, she was on her first flight, selected by NASA in 1996, PhD, hailing from Racine, Wisconsin. And finally, David Brown, who was selected by NASA in the same astronaut class, also on his first flight, captain of the United States Navy. They conducted a successful 16-day science mission and did everything they set out to do, by all accounts. And everything, they had a few problems, but every mission has a few problems. Humidifier kind of acted up. Some of the experiments gave them fits, but essentially had a very successful 16-day science run, covering all manner of life sciences and physical properties and protein crystal growth and everything from that to looking at how dust storms impact global warming was a part of this mission. Let's go back to the White House. Suzanne Malveaux is there. The president is due to arrive any minute now, might be there now. Suzanne, what do you have for us?
We are expecting the president to arrive momentarily at the Southwest Gate by motorcade. As you know, the president returning from his weekend planned at Camp David. He heard the news, we are told, shortly after NASA had lost contact with the shuttle. He was immediately notified by his chief of staff, Andy Card. We're also told that the vice president, as well as Secretary of State Colin Powell, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Richard Myers, was also notified at that time. We were told the president made a call that he has talked to the director of NASA, Sean O'Keefe, at 10:30 this morning, and that U.S. officials have been in contact with Israeli officials about this tragedy. We expect, sources tell us, that the president will be calling Prime Minister Ariel Sharon later in the day. Right now, what is happening is that the aides are behind closed doors. They're debating on just how the president will address the country. We have been told that he will not formally address the nation until after NASA formally gives its presentation, and then the president will speak, we are told. But as you can imagine, Miles, really quite a tragic situation. We saw early this morning people who immediately after they found out back here at the White House, Dr. Rice, as well as other staffers getting the news firsthand, of course, monitoring the situation. This a big tragedy for the country as well as for this administration, already dealing with the situation in Iraq as well as 9/11. Quite a shock to many people here at the White House. Miles?
Sure. All right, Suzanne Malveaux, thank you very much. We will be checking in at the White House frequently all throughout the rest of this afternoon. We're told we're going to hear from NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe first, and then the President will make some sort of address to the nation. We got to remind you about the debris, and I apologize to those of you who've been watching for some length of time if this is very repetitive and irrelevant if you don't live in this part of the world, but it's worth mentioning repeatedly. If you see what you're seeing right here at this parking lot, that's a shot from one of our viewers. That's a piece of Columbia's debris. Don't touch it. The shuttle is just a witch's brew of toxic chemicals. After it lands, the folks who first approached the orbiter are wearing full respirator devices because there's so many gases which come off of it, which might cause you immediate and long-term health effects. We're talking about monomethylhydrazine, nitrogen tetroxide primarily, two very volatile chemicals. They are, after all, designed to create explosions spontaneously, spontaneous combustion, when the two meet. That's what allows the shuttle to maneuver when it's in orbit and when it's in the higher altitudes. All right, we're going to show you something that's kind of raw video coming in. This is video which comes to us. It's amateur video of what we've been showing you through the good graces of WFAA all day. There you see it. Well, we'll try to get that together for you. And as soon as we get it queued up, we'll... but I just want to underscore the point. If you see it, please don't touch it. Notify the authorities and let them know where it is. It's important that they get a hold of all this debris because that'll ultimately be a part of the investigation. But really more important, it's in your own best interest not to touch it because it can really, really cause you some harm. As we try to get that tape together, I want to tell you a little bit about Ilan Ramon. Ilan Ramon, who you see in the far right of this picture here, you see the flag of Israel behind him. First Israeli to fly in space, an absolute hero of the Jewish state, and decorated fighter pilot who actually helped take out Saddam Hussein's nuclear facility in the mid-'80s in Iraq, among other things. Flew in space, the son of a Holocaust survivor who really saw his mission as a manifestation of things to come, of a better day for the Middle East. That might sound a little bit Pollyanna, but he saw this as a way of bringing some hope to his nation and perhaps to his whole region. One of the experiments which he was charged with was to look at the very building blocks of the universe and how micrometeors might have carried the seeds of life from planet to planet, perhaps seeding the solar system with life, if you will. But what's perhaps most interesting about that experiment is the two principal scientists on it were an Israeli and a Palestinian. And it proved that, at least in this case, the high frontier was one place where people who don't get along can find a way to get along. Let's listen to what Ilan Ramon had to say to us before he left.
You're flying some special things with you to space. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yes, I fly with me, first of all, I fly with me the Israeli emblem, which I asked for from the President of Israel. And he sent me an Israeli flag, actually it's an Israeli emblem. I also fly a very special drawing of Peter Ginz, who was a boy, 13, 14-year-old boy in Theresienstadt, one of the camps, and he and a group of other kids there were writing their own paper in the camp, and they were transferring this paper from one to another to read it. And Peter was a very, very talented guy, a boy actually. he was interested in science and in writing and in painting. And he drew at that time, as he visioned, Earth would look like from the moon. And I'm taking his drawing made it after the war, and they are now in the Museum of Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. And they were and gave me this picture, this drawing, and I will take it with me.
Ilan Ramon, a member of the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia, lost above Texas today, right about 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Let's continue our discussion of Ilan Ramon, who is a bona fide hero of the State of Israel. For that, we turn to Kelly Wallace, who joins us from Jerusalem. Kelly?
Miles, as we've been saying throughout the day, tremendous sadness throughout this country, throughout the government, also every day Israelis reacting. Also, Colonel Ramon's family speaking out, his sister-in-law doing an interview with Israeli television a short time ago. She said, quote, "I know that he would want to be remembered as the first Israeli astronaut. He was elated with joy." Also, Colonel Ramon's brother did an interview. He said that he had spoken to Colonel Ramon's wife. They talked about how this was a big tragedy. He also said how everyone was so euphoric, how this was really a dream come true, and obviously now the entire family dealing with the unthinkable. The Prime Minister himself, Ariel Sharon, his office, has issued a statement. The Prime Minister has been watching events, we are told, on television from his farm in southern Israel. In that statement, the Prime Minister's office saying, quote, "The government of Israel and the people of Israel pray together with the whole world for the safety of the astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia." The statement going on to say the state of Israel and its citizens stand at this difficult hour with the families of the astronauts, Colonel Ramon's family, the American people, and the U.S. government, with a joint prayer to God, the Creator, that the astronauts will return safely to their homes. Now, we do know that the U.S. Embassy in Washington, or rather the Israeli Embassy in Washington, has dispatched a team to Florida to be with Colonel Ramon's wife and his 4 children who were there to watch the return of the space shuttle. We also know that the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Danny Ayalon, spoke earlier in the day with the director of NASA, Sean O'Keefe, and a spokesman in Washington for the Israeli embassy, saying this is a tragedy both for the Israeli people and the American people. Throughout the day, our colleagues have been talking to people on the streets of Israel. You can imagine tremendous sadness. One woman telling my colleague, quote, "He was the first astronaut to observe Shabbat in space. It was a beautiful experience for Jewish people, something the Jewish people could be very proud of." We've been talking throughout the day about the context, this coming really as the Israeli people have been dealing with more than 2 years of violence in this second Palestinian intifada against Israel. And Miles, I can tell you I was here when Colonel Ramon took off on the space shuttle, and we watched the coverage, front page news in every newspaper, live coverage on every Israeli television station, a sense of joy, a sense of happiness, and many reporters. Miles, let me toss back to you now for the latest.
Kelly Wallace, thank you very much. And really the kind of attention and excitement that about the mission, which I guess we've lost Kelly. Can we continue the discussion with her, with Kelly? All right, we'll check in with Kelly in just a moment. But the point I was going to try to make is that for many of us here in the United States, for many people who don't follow the space program closely, the whole event of a space shuttle mission, this after all was the 113th mission, become on the order of routine or seemingly routine. We can tell you it wasn't. It wasn't, and anybody who knows anything or took the time to learn about it would tell you that this was an experimental vehicle right on the edge of human capability. We have another view of this, and we've been showing you that view from our affiliate WFAA, which clearly shows an in-flight breakup. There's no doubt about that. The cause is another matter entirely. This is amateur video, which was shot out of Lafayette, Louisiana, from Rob Perillo. Rob is on the line with us. Rob, what did you see and hear?
Well, Miles, I'm a meteorologist. I work for the CBS affiliate in Lafayette, Louisiana. I always tell our viewers to go out, take a look at the shuttle when it comes in. when it doesn't fly space station missions, and normally we can see the shuttle coming across southern Louisiana, and there what you see is a little bit of a different angle of the video that you saw out of WFAA a little bit earlier this morning. I went out to view this shuttle and took off a telescopic lens and went straight out of the video recorder, and you can see again, looks like some of the debris there taking a little bit of a right-hand turn, some of it continuing on. Basically, and after that, we normally would hear the sonic boom, and instead of one singular sonic boom, I heard probably on the order of 5 or 6 smaller sonic booms that were stretched out over about a 10-second time frame.
Well, Rob, that clearly, if you're a shuttle watcher and you look at that, which once again I've been hearkening back to the Mir re-entry, which we brought you a year and a half or so ago. The fact that you saw 5 pieces and heard 5 sonic booms, did you realize immediately there was trouble?
Yeah, I knew immediately, and it's a good thing that you guys probably didn't take the audio part of that tape. I had the NASA website on my broadband computer here, and I ran into the house and heard nothing but silence for the next 10 minutes, and I knew right then and there something was wrong.
This is for him, like shooting it down.
Rob Perillo, can you just give me a sense of your thoughts as you witnessed this?
Well, but I had the same feeling. I remember the Challenger accident. I was working at an aviation company at the time, and the utter shock of and unbelievability of the initial moment. I had gotten my wife up and my daughter, my 9-year-old, to go outside and take a look at this, and the astonishment that you feel right offhand is indescribable, and you know immediately that when you see multiple pieces of debris flying that it's not a good situation. We knew what we were looking at as the system was coming in. It looked good. We normally see it when it's between Dallas and San Antonio. That's where I picked it up. And then where you see that debris was more than likely very close to the Texas-Louisiana border.
Mr. Perillo, thank you for sharing that tape with us. We do appreciate it, because what that shows us is the time immediately after the WFAA tape, the shuttle moving from west to east, Mach 16 or so. Obviously, they're very quickly thereafter, but it definitely shows that distinct pattern. Multiple targets is the technical term, big pieces, multiple sonic booms, quite clear. We're talking about an in-flight breakup. Where are we headed now? All right, here we go. This is a live picture from our affiliate KDFW out of Dallas-Fort Worth. You're looking at a piece of debris. Space Shuttle Columbia. We're told the debris field extends 120 miles or so. When you're traveling that fast, that high, that's to be expected. Of course, some pieces lighter than others. Some pieces have aerodynamic qualities. They'll flutter down. Others will travel down very quickly. It's very, it's impossible to make out what that is, except to tell you it's because it is dark. It is probably something to do with the underbelly, the portions of the shuttle that has those dark tiles. There are 20,000 tiles in all on a space shuttle. I've actually scaled back the number a little bit, but tens of thousands anyhow. The black ones on the bottom are designed to handle more significant heat loads. The whiter tiles, which are more on the top and sides where the heat is not as much of an issue, are designed to handle to shed less heat, put it that way. Live pictures, KDFW, and I don't know exactly where that is, but I'll just tell you that it's obviously in that swath of Texas from I-45 all the way to the Louisiana border. Let's send it over to Heidi Collins. Heidi?
Thanks, Miles. We are going to be seeing many more pictures like that because that debris field is so very large. We want to take a minute now, though, to talk more about the astronauts. Of course, we are all mourning the loss of each and every one of those 7 astronauts today. 6 Americans on board, 1 non-American. That non-American is Israeli Air Force Colonel Ilan Ramon. He was a payload specialist, 48 years old, married and father of 4. We've been talking about him a lot today because of the special attention that went to him for being the very first Israeli astronaut. And as Kelly Wallace has been reporting, certainly during a time of unrest and tragedy in that country already, he was a symbol of hope and had hoped very much to bring that to his family and his countrymen in Israel. Let's go ahead to Judy Woodruff now. She's standing by in Washington, D.C. to tell us even more about Colonel Ramon. Judy?
Thank you, Heidi. We are in Washington, as you said, and with me now is the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Daniel Ayalon. Mr. Ambassador, how did you find out about this morning?
Well, first of all, I heard it from the news, and then Mr. Sean O'Keefe, the administrator of NASA, was kind enough to call and give me an update. And this is a big tragedy for the United States, for Israel, and mainly for the families. And this is where we are headed now, to be with the family and to help in any way we can.
You're flying in a few minutes, or a few minutes from now, to where? Where will you go?
We're going to go to the Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral in Florida. This is where the family is being flown to. They were waiting for the landing in Houston.
They were in Houston waiting.
They were in Houston waiting. So right now they're being flown by NASA. We will go there, we will meet with them, and we will try to give them as much comfort as possible.
You told me a moment ago that you had just met Mr. Ramon, 2 weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago, before the shuttle flight took off.
Yes, this was on the day of the launch. This was a very special day for Israel, for Israeli-U.S. relations, and I think from a very human perspective, the special story of Ilan Ramon, who is the son of a survivor, who took with him to space, as he mentioned here before, a drawing of Peter Gintz, a 14-year-old Jewish boy who perished in the Holocaust. And before his death, he was drawing the Earth as he imagined from space. This picture, this drawing, went with Ilan on board and stayed with him to the end.
What did it mean for the people of Israel, of your country, to have an astronaut going into space on a shuttle for the first time from Israel?
Well, there was very special significance. First of all, we are very proud of our technological advance and prowess, so this was also a testament to Israel's position in high tech and excellence and progress. And of course, every endeavor that we do with the United States, we're very much proud of. So it was also a testament to the strength of the relationship between the U.S. and America, and Israel. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, and we have a special bond. And we took it into another dimension up in space. And of course, the special story of Ilan Ramon. And just think that in 2 generations, when we were at the lowest ebb, on verge of demise in the Holocaust, and in 2 generations, we were soaring up to excellence and to the state of the art. So this was very, very significant.
Tell us a little bit more about Colonel Ramon. As you said, as I understand, both his parents were survivors of the concentration. His mother was a survivor of the concentration camp. He had fought in 2 wars for Israel.
Yes, he was a
fighter pilot.
Right.
And went on 7 or 8 years ago to say, I want to have a career as an astronaut.
Yes, he did. That was his I guess, calling. And of course, in our context with the United States, with the administration, and we thought of new areas of cooperation. The natural one was to look up into space. We have been cooperating in so many areas here on Earth. So there was only to look up to extend the cooperation and the friendship between our 2 countries. That was a natural thing to do. And Ilan Ramon was the natural Israeli astronaut to send. He was the prepared mentally, and of course professionally, he was the best we could offer.
What about his family? He had 4 children, yes. A wife. They've been living with him in the United States. They obviously have extended family in Israel. This has to be unimaginable.
Yes, it is. His father came specially. The training was, Judy, for more than 2 years. So he came here with the family. And they were very well integrated into the Houston community. His kids, he has 4 kids, as you mentioned, they went to school there in Houston. And his wife was very much a member of the community there. They really enjoyed, I talked to his wife, they really enjoyed life in Houston, and being with the astronauts, being with the Americans, it was a very special experience for them.
And now, Ambassador Ayalon, you're headed to Cape Canaveral for what is going to be a very difficult, very, very difficult time with them. We do so appreciate your coming in. Ambassador Daniel Ayalon from Israel to the United States, about to fly, as he said, to Cape Canaveral to join the family of astronaut Ilan Ramon, the Israeli astronaut on board the shuttle Columbia. Once again, we're waiting for a press conference, at NASA press conference. That's at 1 o'clock Eastern. As we leave you, the flag at the White House at half-staff. Miles, back to you.
Need a name. Name?
Ein Feuerball stürzt auf die Erde. Die Raumfähre Columbia ist nicht mehr zu retten. Bei 6-facher Schallgeschwindigkeit und in rund 60.000 Metern Höhe zerbricht das Space Shuttle beim Landeanflug auf die Erde in mehrere Teile. Augenzeugen berichten von einem lauten Knall in der Luft. Wenig später rasen die Trümmer der Columbia auf Texas zu. Um 15:16 Uhr hätte die Columbia auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral landen sollen. Doch um 15 Uhr verlieren die Techniker im Kontrollzentrum den Kontakt. Banges Warten, doch der Raumpendler ist von ihren Bildschirmen verschwunden. Am 16. Januar war die Columbia ins All gestartet. Eine von vielen Missionen. Seit fast 22 Jahren ist die Raumfähre schon im Einsatz. An Bord 7 Astronauten. Sie hatten Experimente in der Schwerelosigkeit durchgeführt. Eigentlich eine Routinearbeit. Alles verlief planmäßig. Die Stimmung unter den Astronauten war gut. Unter ihnen befand sich auch der 48-jährige Ilan Ramon. Der Familienvater flog als erster israelischer Astronaut in den Weltraum. Auf seinen Beruf war er immer stolz. Wenn du in Israel zu jemandem sagst, du bist ein Astronaut, dann bedeutet das, derjenige ist verrückt. Es ist eine Art Sprichwort. Mit dem hatte ich allerdings immer meine Probleme. Die Wahrscheinlichkeit, dass diese Katastrophe einer der Astronauten überlebt haben könnte, ist verschwindend gering. Zur Stunde suchen Experten der NASA nach Wrackteilen der Columbia im Bundesstaat Texas. Die Bevölkerung ist aufgerufen, die möglicherweise giftigen Teile des Shuttles auf gar keinen Fall zu berühren. Noch ist völlig unklar, was zum Absturz des Space Shuttles geführt hat. Amerika trauert mit den Angehörigen der Opfer des Unglücks.
Der Himmel über Texas, ein Kondensstreifen, die amerikanische Raumfähre Columbia im Landeanflug. Gegen 15 Uhr, 16 Minuten vor der geplanten Landung auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral, meldet sich die Besatzung noch einmal, keine Probleme, dann reißt der Funkkontakt ab. Ein lauter Knall, es hat sich angehört wie ein Autounfall, berichtet wenig später ein Augenzeuge. Das Drama nimmt seinen Lauf. Zeitgleich im Kontrollzentrum, der Notfall wird ausgerufen, der Präsident verständigt, Rettungsteams schwärmen aus. Über die Medien geht ein Appell an die Bevölkerung, achten Sie auf Trümmerteile, nähern Sie sich nicht irgendwelchen herabgefallenen Gegenständen, sie könnten giftiges Material enthalten. Rückblende. Donnerstag, 16. Januar, Lift-Off in Cape Canaveral, ein Bilderbuchstart. 7 Astronauten sind an Bord, darunter auch Luftwaffenoberst Ramon, der erste Israeli im All. Rund um die Startrampe, höchste Sicherheitsstufe. Ein Terroranschlag wird nicht ausgeschlossen. Wegen des Israelis an Bord sind die Nerven angespannt. In der Folgezeit werden die Astronauten mehr als 80 Experimente durchführen. Die Wissenschaftler hoffen sich neue Erkenntnisse für die Forschung. 16 Tage später, es ist kurz nach 4:30, als ein Beamter des NASA-Bodenkontrollzentrums bestätigt, das Shuttle ist verloren. Ein Terroranschlag wird zunächst ausgeschlossen. Experten vermuten, dass das Hitzeschild der Raumfähre versagt haben könnte. Die Columbia zerbricht in rund 60 Kilometern Höhe.
Bundeskanzler Schröder hat übrigens umgehend ein Beileidstelegramm an US-Präsident Bush geschickt und sein Beileid sowohl gegenüber den Angehörigen als auch gegenüber den Amerikanern ausgedrückt.
Beim Start der Columbia am 16. Januar stand die Mission noch unter einem besonderen Schutz. Erstmals an Bord einer Raumfähre war ein Astronaut aus Israel, der Luftwaffenoberst Ilan Ramon. Dementsprechend waren die Sicherheitsvorkehrungen rund um den Weltraumbahnhof in Cape Canaveral außergewöhnlich scharf. Allerdings gab es bereits beim Start auch ein kleineres Problem. Die Columbia hatte einen Teil der Isolierung eines Außentanks verloren. Dies war jedoch nach NASA-Angaben nur eine geringfügige Beeinträchtigung.
11, 10, 9, 8, 7. We have a go for main engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia.
Liftoff in Cape Canaveral. Applaus in Tel Aviv. Zum ersten Mal fliegt ein israelischer Astronaut ins All. An Bord der amerikanischen Raumfähre Columbia. Verteidigungsminister Mofaz spricht von einem historischen Augenblick für den Staat Israel und für den Astronauten und Luftwaffenoberst Ilan Ramon. 16 Tage sollen er und seine 6 Kollegen durchs All fliegen und dabei rund um die Uhr Forschung betreiben im Schichtdienst. Mehr als 80 Experimente sind geplant, von denen sich die Wissenschaftler neue Erkenntnisse unter anderem in der Biologie und der Physik erhoffen. Der Start der Columbia war von außergewöhnlich scharfen Sicherheitsvorkehrungen begleitet, aus Angst vor Terroranschlägen. Schon Stunden vor dem Start war der Luftraum über Cape Canaveral weiträumig abgesperrt worden.
Let's bring in the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Dan Gilman. Ambassador Gilman, on behalf of the people of America, we offer our condolences to the people of Israel on this moment.
I can't hear him.
Apparently he cannot hear us, so we'll, can you hear us now, Mr. Ambassador? No, he's unable to hear us. Let me show you something that is rather dramatic. One of our engineers here, who is a pilot as well as I am, we talk about these kinds of things a lot, pulled up the weather radar for the Shreveport, Louisiana area, and that is the wreckage of the shuttle Columbia coming through, reacting to the radar, which detects heat and motion. And that green area is just kind of the ground clutter from Shreveport. But what you're seeing, that red scar there, the final remnants of the Space Shuttle Columbia before it fell to Earth. There's Alexandria, Monroe, Shreveport, Tyler, Texas, right in the border. We've been told the debris field extends right to the border of Louisiana. I suspect there's some places in Louisiana right now where there are pieces of debris. We haven't heard from as many people from there, but the word to them is the same as the word to the people of Texas, which is stay away from it. Call the authorities, but stay away from it. Let's go now back to the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Dan Gilliman. Mr. Ambassador, good to have you with us. And what I said before was on behalf of the people of America, we'd like to extend our condolences to the people of Israel. And just wanted to get your thoughts right now of Ilan Ramon and what he signified to your country.
Well, thank you, and I would like to express also the condolences of the Israeli people, although I'm still clinging to some sliver of hope that maybe our prayers will come true. Our prayers and thoughts and hearts are with the American people and with Ilan Ramon's family on this very, very difficult day. This is a very special day for us. This was meant to be a very special day for us because this cooperation really demonstrated the true bond between Israel and the United States. Two brave and free countries, two great democracies sharing together in this quest to explore and to excel. And Ilan Ramon to us was not just a pilot or an astronaut, he was a symbol. He was a symbol of excellence and freedom at a time when Israel is undergoing one of the most difficult periods in his life. And I can tell you that he became a national hero just by going into space with his American colleagues. I spoke to the Prime Minister last night, and he was really anxiously awaiting Ilan Ramon's return. I spoke to many friends in Israel today, and the devastation and the horror and the grief are just unimaginable, because it was a ray of hope, and it was a ray of something good happening in the midst of two very, very difficult years in which Israel is facing terrorism and some of the most ugly and vicious and brutal manifestations of human behavior ever before witnessed. And the fact that Ilan Ramon, the son of Holocaust survivors, actually went up there with his American colleagues, forging this bond, and really saying to everybody that at the end of the day, good prevails over evil, and that we shall all prevail over the evil surrounding us, brought us a lot of hope and a lot of elation. And because of that, the feelings today are of such devastation and such real sadness.
It's hard to imagine how profound the sadness must be, given especially. Can you still hear me, Mr. Ambassador? I'm afraid we've lost communication with him once again. We'll leave it at that. All right. We've been hearing all morning from a lot of people across a wide swath of central, northern, eastern part of Texas who have seen things and have actually found some wreckage, which we invite you to stay away from. Linda Steen or Steed? Linda Steed is on the line with us now. Linda, what did you see and hear this morning?
Well, we got up to watch the shuttle come over, and about 2 minutes after 8, we saw it on the western horizon. And when it got nearer, we could see flecks or pieces of something coming off of it, because we thought it was just the afterburners or something. But when it got directly overhead, you could see more things coming off the back of it, but we still didn't realize what was happening. And then we heard the racket, the sound, after it passed by us. It reverberated and reverberated for several minutes, like an earthquake or something. But that's basically it. I guess we saw it as it was breaking up, though we didn't realize it at the time.
Linda, describe that racket a little better for us, if you could. What did it sound like?
Well, it started out like a heavy thunder and a rolling thunder sound. And then the dogs started barking and chickens started crowing and everything. Just a real weird sound. And then got shook the earth. That was kind of it. Kind of like a really heavy thunder.
Did you see anything out your window then, or did you just hear it? I mean, you were watching it.
I was standing outside. Yes, I was standing outside. We saw it.
Describe it then. Describe exactly what it looked like.
Well, coming toward us, we could see the sun glinting off of it, and we could see like shiny pieces in behind it that we thought was, like I said, afterburner. But all the time it came directly overhead, we could still see these pieces from behind. But there was a main part of it that seemed to be intact as it came overhead.
Yeah. Linda Steed, have you heard about reports, or have you seen any of the debris?
Not personally, but 5 miles west of where I live right here, there are some pieces down in a church parking lot and behind the church in the woods. And there's some down in town. My son called me a while ago, and he saw a piece that was right downtown Nacogdoches, right behind one of the banks.
You're looking at live pictures from KDFW from their helicopter. This is a piece of the Space Shuttle Columbia, which lies in a median of a highway there.
That would be Highway 7 out near the airport, kind of west of town.
I see. So that's not far from where you are, Linda?
It's not too terribly far from where I am. No, I'm west of town, and it's west of town, just further south than I am.
Hard to pick up what that is, but...
They said it was about a 10-foot piece, is what I heard.
It's a big piece, that is for sure.
Yes.
And difficult to figure out what part of the shuttle that is. In any case...
Sir, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Something cut in on my phone, but that's okay.
That's okay. I got to ask your thoughts, not just as a person who happened to have this happen on their back door. What are your thoughts as an American at this moment?
Oh, I'm devastated. Devastated. It's unbelievable. Just makes you so sad.
Yeah. Linda Steed, joining us from Nacogdoches County, Texas, where significant pieces of debris from Space Shuttle Columbia have fallen as it disintegrated at an altitude of 200,000 feet, some 12,500 miles an hour, much faster than a speeding bullet. And I'll call your attention, well, we've got a wider shot now, but there was a triangle of crime scene tape there, that yellow tape that you see. That's what we're encouraging you all to do if you find a piece like that. Get the authorities out there, cordon it off, don't go near it. The kid could be very problematic and could cause you some harm because of all of the witch's brew of rocket fuel which is on board any space shuttle.
CNN's Alec Fraser is a veteran of the U.S. Navy, Navy captain, has a lot of experience in defense matters, intelligence matters, through his tour of duty. He joins us now with some insights on a couple of aspects of this which we have to at least touch the base on, and that is terrorism. Alec?
I think there are a couple of things that people ought to know, because anytime an incident like this happens, there's a concern that there was a terrorist threat and that somebody actually shot it down by a missile. There are two reasons that this could not happen by a missile intercept. Number one is the altitude. Most missiles cannot fly above 100,000 feet, mainly because there's not enough air for the tail fins to be able to guide the missile. And number two is the shuttle was running at a Mach 6 rate, and Mach 3 is as fast as most intercepts can be done.
Alec, we probably should do our mathematics. 12,500 miles an hour, I believe, equates to faster than even Mach 6, but the point is moot because it's way too fast. Right of your screen, by the way, I want to point out is the President's motorcade on its way from Camp David. And I believe they're driving in because of the bad weather there in Washington. I'm not positive of that, but that would probably explain why he's not in the helicopter. Alec, continue on your point there.
Well, for those two reasons, this type of intercept could never happen. There are reports that people saw commercial aircraft in the area of the space shuttle, but you've got to remember there's an altitude difference there of 170,000 feet, and any type of intercept or any type of problem of a mid-air collision is just simply not possible.
Yeah. So we sort of have to touch the base. We have to bring it up just to knock it down, if nothing else, in this day and age, don't we?
That's right. And anything that's going that fast and that high is impossible to be considered as a terrorist missile attack. And remember those concerns that we've had of airplanes, commercial airliners being shot down by shoulder-fired infrared heat-seeking missiles. Those only go to 2 or 3 miles high, and we're talking about 200,000 feet here, so those are not a threat. So you'd be working with a radar-guided missile, a very complex, highly technical system that could intercept something that high or that fast. And again, 100,000 feet or Mach 3 is about as much as anybody can do.
Okay, faster than anything out there. And we should underscore that point, but as we say, given the environment in which we live, we've got to at least express that to make people realize that it isn't possible and is not a likely scenario. And that might be something that is going through people's minds, right, Alec?
Right, and it's just not possible.
All right. We would like to underscore a couple of points for you. First of all, we are expecting about 23 minutes from now a briefing from the NASA Administrator, Sean O'Keefe, who, a little more than a year into his job, has quite a job ahead of him. He will be addressing reporters at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and we will, of course, bring that to you live. It's very likely that there's not a lot that he can offer all of us in the way of technical information to give us a sense of what happened, except to tell you what you can clearly see on your screen right there, that the shuttle disintegrated. Columbia, the oldest shuttle in the orbiter fleet of 4, disintegrated over Texas. As we just told you, 12,500 miles an hour. I don't know what that equates to Mach, but it's real fast, and 200,000 feet above the ground, disintegrated into those multiple fireballs, 5, 6, maybe more of them, big ones, and rained down debris over an area extending beyond 120 miles from Interstate 45 in Texas all the way to the border. We suspect as well as parts of Louisiana, although we haven't heard from people in Louisiana. There's a piece of debris there, Anderson County, Texas. Stay away from it because of the toxic brew which is on board a shuttle. Could cause you great harm. It's also would be a violation of federal law to touch it. Been hoping to get some more interviews with the crew. We talked to the crew before they left, and I'm wondering if we have another one of those in the gate, ready to go. All right, we're going to try to get that together. We're hoping to. Mike Brooks, our law enforcement expert, has been on the phone with the FBI, and in this situation, even though we just talked about how remote the chance of terrorism is, the FBI is involved, isn't it, Mike?
Yes, they are, Miles. I just got off the phone with the Dallas office of the FBI, with their spokesperson, Special Agent Laurie Bailey. And Special Agent Bailey told me that they have set up a command post, and they are treating this right now as a military aircraft down. And their main responsibility right now, the FBI is assisting in containing any debris fields at all. They have mobilized right now over 30 agents and support staff. Along with their evidence response team, which is a team of highly trained professionals that will go out and contain the evidence and process it and work together with the military to try to, again, piece everything back together again. But there have been different reports around the state, around the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that there have been number of debris fields, debris that has been raining down over that particular area. They right now also are fielding calls from local law enforcement and from citizens. And I want to again stress, and the FBI wants to again stress, that if you do find something, call your local law enforcement, call your local fire department, but don't go near it, don't touch it. As Miles was saying, the toxic witch's brew, if you will, that's contained in a shuttle, and just leave it where it lies and call the local authorities. Miles?
Mike Brooks, and let's just underscore the point one more time. The FBI is involved, but we need to state this as clearly as we can for viewers. Terrorism is not really on the radar screen here.
Not at all. Right now, they're not even talking about anything at all about terrorism when I was talking with the FBI. They don't think that terrorism plays any role in this whatsoever.
All right, the best we can hope right now is that the FBI and all the local authorities there are able to marshal their resources, and it's got to be extensive given the debris field. Keep people away from these pieces.
Very much so. And in the Dallas office of the FBI, they have smaller offices outside in Texarkana and other small towns in and around Texas they call resident agencies. And they're also getting those people in their office to work and coordinate with the local law enforcement on trying to locate any debris that's found in some of the even remote locations in and around the state of Texas. Miles?
All right, Mr. Brooks, Mike Brooks, please stay in close contact, stay in touch with your sources for us, and keep us posted on what they know there, if you would. This past week was a difficult week for NASA before this happened. January 27th, the anniversary of the Apollo 1 fire. You'll recall that fire on the launch pad in 1967. Killed 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting the 3rd astronaut right now. You'll forgive me. In any case, it was also the anniversary of the Space Shuttle Challenger's explosion on January 28th. And it was on that occasion that Rick Husband, the commander of the Space Shuttle Columbia, radioed down some words to Mission Control marking that moment.
Well, things are going really great, Miles. We're having a great time up here. We had a great ride to orbit, and all the activation of the experiments in the space hab went extremely well. And we're really, we've got our space legs and up and running.
Okay, that was not at all what I told you it was. That was a little piece of an interview I did with the crew on the Saturday after they launched. Rick Husband talking about their time in space, and it might be worth at some point replaying a healthier chunk of that. We have isolated the moment where Mission Control first became aware that there was a problem. So the last message. Well, all right. We're going to try to get all this stuff together, and we will go to Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
Es ist 12:07 und hier ist RTL aktuell. Drama am Himmel. Die amerikanische Raumfähre Columbia zerbricht im Landeanflug auf Cape Canaveral. Alle 7 Astronauten kommen ums Leben. Die NASA warnt die Bevölkerung vor Trümmerteilen in Texas. Während Amerika unter Schock steht, rätseln die Experten über die Unglücksursache. Guten Abend und herzlich willkommen bei RTL aktuell, heute mit einer Sonderausgabe. Denn wie Sie es möglicherweise schon im Laufe des Nachmittags erfahren haben, ist heute Mittag eine Raumfähre über Texas abgestürzt. Wenige Minuten vor der geplanten Landung in Cape Canaveral zerbrach die Raumfähre über Texas in mehrere Teile und stürzte ab. An Bord befanden sich 7 Astronauten, darunter auch der israelische Staatsbürger der erste israelische Staatsbürger im All. Keiner von ihnen hat das Unglück überlebt. Noch ist unklar, wie es zu dem Unglück heute um etwa 2:45 deutscher Zeit kommen konnte. Thorsten Berger mit Einzelheiten.
Der Moment der Katastrophe, aufgenommen von einem Amateurfilmer in der Nähe von Dallas in Texas. Es ist 16 Minuten nach 3 mitteleuropäischer Ortszeit. Das Shuttle dringt mit 20.000 Stundenkilometern auf 63.000 Metern Höhe in die Erdatmosphäre ein. Im Kontrollzentrum in Houston bricht wenige Sekunden später der Funkkontakt zur Columbia ab. Wo gerade noch freudige Erwartung auf den Abschluss einer gelungenen Mission herrschte, breitet sich nun Unruhe aus. Was die Techniker nicht wissen, wenige 100 Kilometer von ihnen entfernt zerreißt es in diesem Moment die Columbia über der texanischen Stadt Dallas in Dutzende Stücke. Zeugen berichten, sie hätten einen lauten Knall gehört. Wenige Minuten später wird ein Sprecher der NASA erklären, wir haben das Shuttle verloren. Die Columbia, sie war das älteste Shuttle der NASA. Bereits 81, vor mehr als 20 Jahren startete sie zu ihrem Jungfernflug. Vor 16 Tagen nun hob sie zu jenem Flug ab, der nun in einer Katastrophe endete. Es war eine Routinemission mit 7 Astronauten an Bord. Familienväter waren unter ihnen und auch der erste israelische Staatsbürger im All, Ilian Ramon. Der Start wurde begleitet von starken Sicherheitsvorkehrungen aus Angst vor Anschlägen. Und er war mehrfach verschoben worden. Eigentlich sollte die Columbia zu dieser Mission schon im Juli vergangenen Jahres starten. Doch im All lief dann alles wie geplant. Rund 80 wissenschaftliche Experimente führten die Crewmitglieder durch. Die Katastrophe bahnte sich offenbar erst wenige Minuten vor der Landung an. Bis dahin war der Funkkontakt normal. Nicht nur in den USA, auch in Israel nahmen die Menschen die Nachricht von dem Unglück mit Bestürzung auf. Für uns ist das eine sehr persönliche Katastrophe, sagt dieser Mann in einem Jerusalemer Gasthaus. Ich denke an die Frau und die Kinder von Ilian Ramon. In Dallas haben Anwohner inzwischen die ersten Trümmerteile der Columbia gefunden. Die winzigen Reste einer Raumfähre, die wenige Minuten vor der Landung in der Luft zerschellte.
In New York sind wir jetzt verbunden mit meinem Kollegen Christoph Lang. Christoph, es wird viel spekuliert. Es gibt 3 Theorien, denke ich, über die Absturzursache. Was können Sie uns sagen?
Das ist richtig. Experten halten 3 Unglücksursachen für denkbar. Erstens, die Fluglagekontrolle des Shuttles hat versagt, was zur Folge hätte, dass es entweder zu steil oder vielleicht auch kopfüber in die Erdatmosphäre eingetaucht wäre, was das Shuttle nicht überleben kann bei Temperaturen von 1700 Grad. Die zweite Möglichkeit ist, das Hitzeschild am Boden des Shuttles hat versagt. Das ist vielleicht die wahrscheinlichste Möglichkeit. Und da richtet man jetzt das Augenmerk auf einen kleinen Unfall beim Start am 16. Januar. Da ist von dem externen Zusatztank des Shuttles ein Stück der Isolierung abgerissen, hat offensichtlich die linke Tragfläche des Shuttles getroffen. NASA-Experten sagten damals überhaupt kein Problem. Heute sieht man das vielleicht ein bisschen anders. Und die dritte Möglichkeit, der Rumpf des Shuttles hat nachgegeben aufgrund von Ermüdungserscheinungen. Wir haben es ja gehört, die Columbia ist das älteste der 4 Shuttles, aber andererseits, Shuttles sind auf 100 Flüge ausgelegt und das wäre erst der 28. gewesen. Also normalerweise müsste so ein Shuttle das überstehen und es ist sicherlich auch eines der bestgewartesten Fahrzeuge auf der ganzen Welt.
Christoph, natürlich wurde auch sofort darüber spekuliert, kann es ein Terroranschlag gewesen sein?
Ja, aber das sagt sowohl die NASA als auch das US-Außenministerium, als auch das FBI extrem unwahrscheinlich. Eine Rakete zum Beispiel, die könnte eine solche Höhe gar nicht erreichen. Also da glauben wir nicht dran. Und auch die Sicherheitsvorkehrungen beim Start waren extrem stark, weil nämlich im Moment ein israelischer Staatsbürger mit an Bord war und auch die allgemeine Lage ist ja bedrohlich.
Es sind viele Trümmerteile über Texas niedergegangen. Die Behörden warnen davor, dass man die berühren soll. Warum eigentlich?
Das ist richtig. Das Trümmerfeld zieht sich von Zentral-Texas, die Gegend um Dallas, bis in den Osten Texas rein. Das ist ein sehr großes Feld. Alles ist abgesperrt worden. Man darf sie deshalb nicht anfassen, weil diese Trümmerteile giftig sein könnten. Und das hängt zusammen mit den Treibstoffkomponenten der Columbia.
Herzlichen Dank, Christoph Lang, für diese Informationen. Wir werden später wahrscheinlich noch mal zu Ihnen schalten. Herzlichen Dank für den Moment. Ja, Sie haben es gehört, noch ist unklar, warum die Columbia abgestürzt ist. Offenbar nahm die Katastrophe aber beim Wiedereintritt aus dem Weltall in die Erdatmosphäre ihren Anfang. Was diesen Moment so kritisch macht, dazu mehr von unserem Luft- und Raumfahrtexperten Ralf Benkel.
Diese Archivbilder zeigen ein Space Shuttle kurz vor dem Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre. Die Computer haben jetzt die Kontrolle, denn die Raumfähre muss in einem ganz bestimmten Flugwinkel in die äußersten Luftschichten eintreten. Durch die Fenster ist bereits das Feuer zu erkennen, das durch die extreme Reibung entsteht. Denn in diesem Augenblick bremst alleine der Luftwiderstand die Geschwindigkeit des Shuttles von knapp 30.000 Stundenkilometern auf wenige Tausend ab. Neben den ersten Startsekunden ist das die kritischste Phase der Mission. Denn nur der schwarze Hitzeschild auf der Unterseite hält die extremen Temperaturen aus. Reißen Teile davon ab oder taucht das Shuttle in falscher Lage in die Atmosphäre ein, sodass Teile des Rumpfes von den Flammen erfasst werden, gibt es keine Rettung.
Die Astronauten können nichts sehen in diesen 5 Minuten. Sie können höchstens merken am Abbremsvorgang, dass irgendwas schief geht. Aber innerhalb von wenigen Minuten lösen sich dann die Tragflächen und die Steuerflächen. Und zum Schluss explodiert der Rumpf. Und das ist eine Sache dann von wenigen Minuten.
Wie groß die Hitze beim Wiedereintritt wird, veranschaulicht dieser Versuch im Windkanal. Rund 2000 Grad wirken hier auf die Hitzeschutzscheibe ein. Wirkt die Temperatur zu lange ein oder weist das Material Vorschäden auf, reißt es ab. Was dahinter liegt, verglüht. Ob das Hitzeschild der Columbia ähnlich wie hier Schäden aufwies, ist noch unklar. Bilder vom Start vor 16 Tagen zeigen jedenfalls, Teile einer Eisschicht, die sich auf der Oberfläche des kalten Treibstofftanks gebildet hatten, scheinen gegen eine der Tragflächen geprallt zu sein. Denkbar wäre auch, dass Weltraumschrott in der Umlaufbahn, ob Satelliten oder Raketenteile, das Hitzeschild beschädigt haben könnten. Dies wird jetzt zu prüfen sein. Die Missionsdaten werden im Augenblick schon genau unter die Lupe genommen.
Und da ist es eben sehr gefährlich, wenn die Kacheln nicht alle halten. Es sind immer welche verloren gegangen, aber wenn eine ganze Schicht abplatzt, dann kann man nur noch beten.
Pannen hatte es in der vergangenen Zeit mehrfach gegeben. Hier ist deutlich zu sehen, wie der Columbia immer wieder Teile des Hitzeschildes abgerissen sind. Mitte 2002 entdeckte die NASA Risse in den Treibstoffleitungen. Die Starts wurden vorübergehend verschoben. Noch nie zuvor sind Raumfahrzeuge so oft wiederverwendet worden wie das Shuttle. Dabei hatte die NASA vor dem Unglück ihren Wartungsaufwand schon drastisch erhöht. Das ganze Shuttle-Programm steht jetzt aber in Frage.
Und jetzt ist er bei mir, unser Luft- und Raumfahrtexperte Ralf Benko. Ralf, wenn wir uns die Bilder gerade noch mal vor Augen halten von diesen Kondensstreifen, was kann man aus diesen Bildern lernen?
Also ich denke, man kann schon daraus erkennen, dass das Shuttle relativ frühzeitig auseinandergebrochen sein muss. Wir wissen, dass die Lufthülle ungefähr unter 100 Kilometer Höhe über der Erde anfängt dichter zu werden. Das bedeutet, ab 80 Kilometer Höhe wird es langsam heiß am Shuttle. Da kommen die ersten Flammen, die hochzüngeln und das Ganze unter eine starke Belastungsprobe setzen. Und ungefähr bei 70, 60 Kilometer ist die größte Belastung erreicht. Danach wird es wieder schwächer. Und da wir sehen, dass die Teile mit großer Geschwindigkeit unterwegs waren und quasi fast ungebremst dort eingetreten sind, und die sind ja auch schon ziemlich zerteilt, wir sehen ja verschiedene Einzelteile, die schon sich auf die Erde runter bewegen, muss das Shuttle relativ früh auseinandergebrochen sein.
Dass man zu dem Zeitpunkt des Unglücks keinen Funkkontakt hatte, ist ja, denke ich, normal. Vielleicht können Sie dazu auch mehr sagen.
Gut, das ist eigentlich schon immer so gewesen, weil im Grunde eine so große Flammenkorona das ganze Raumfahrzeug einhüllt, dass es im Grunde zu einer kurzen Funkunterbrechung kommt und sich die Besatzung dann normalerweise danach wieder meldet, sobald dann der Endanflug beginnt. Und in dieser Phase ist sie wirklich auf sich allein gestellt und da weiß die Bodenstation auch erstmal nicht sehr viel, weil das Flugzeug oder das Shuttle quasi, auch die Antennen nicht mehr so richtig funktionieren.
Wir haben vorhin auch darüber gesprochen, dass die Lagekontrolle, also quasi die Stabilisierung des Flugzeuges, dieser Maschine kann man ja nicht sagen, aber dieser Raumfähre eventuell defekt war. Kann es vielleicht auch sein, dass die Technik einfach ein bisschen alt ist und dass da möglicherweise auch technische Probleme aufgetreten sind, weil einfach man mit so einer doch alten Technik fliegt?
Im Grunde ist das Shuttle ja Technologie der 70er Jahre. Also wenn man sich die ersten Bilder anschaut, wie das Cockpit damals aussah, das war also wirklich nicht viel anders als ein Flugzeugcockpit. Man hat nachgebessert. Die NASA hat einiges getan, moderne Computer eingebaut, man hat viele Teile ausgetauscht und immer wieder überwacht. Aber es ist eben wirklich eine Sache, bei der es keine Erfahrungen bisher gibt, weil Raumfahrzeuge bisher nie so oft wiederverwendet worden sind. Und das bedeutet, dass die NASA eigentlich jetzt erst Erfahrungen sammeln muss. Man hat immer wieder reagiert. Es gab den Unfall 1986. Und mittlerweile war man eigentlich relativ sicher, dass man die neuralgischen Punkte wirklich im Auge hat. Doch heute anscheinend muss man das wieder in Frage stellen.
Vielen Dank für diese Informationen, Ralf Benko, hier bei mir im Studio. Ich will dazu beitragen, dass meine Landsleute ihre Probleme wenigstens für kurze Zeit vergessen. Das ist ein Satz von Ilan Ramon vor dem Start der Raumfähre Columbia vor 16 Tagen. Ramon war der erste israelische Astronaut, der jemals ins All flog. Der 48 Jahre alte Sohn einer Auschwitz-Überlebenden gehört zu der 7-köpfigen Crew, die heute auf so tragische Weise ums Leben kam. Silke Teichmann berichtet.
2 Frauen und 5 Männer, 16 Tage lang waren die Astronauten im All. Rund um die Uhr hatten sie geforscht und das sind die Gesichter hinter der Katastrophe. Die Amerikaner David M. Brown, Michael Anderson, Rick Husband, William McCool, seine Kolleginnen Laurel Clark, die gebürtige Inderin Kaplana Chawla und schließlich Ilan Ramon, Israels erster Astronaut. 5 Jahre lang hatte er sich auf diese Mission intensiv vorbereitet. Eine Mission, die ihm, aber auch Israel viel bedeutete. Zunächst einmal, es ist großartig, hier oben zu sein, und wir sind so fleißig hier, dass ich gar nicht dazu komme, daran zu denken, dass Sabbat ist. So fröhlich hatte er sich vor wenigen Tagen noch aus dem All gemeldet. Unendlicher Stolz und Freude heute abgelöst durch Trauer und Entsetzen. Hier in diesem israelischen Fernsehstudio hatte Ilan Ramons Vater heute das Drama verfolgt, live am Bildschirm. Wie die ganze Familie wollte er nur erleben, wie Ilan wieder zurück zur Erde kehrt. Wir haben noch nicht begriffen, was da geschehen ist. Wir haben es einfach noch nicht begriffen. Ich sitze hier, sehe fern und habe noch keine offizielle Bestätigung gesehen. Das Einzige, was ich sehe, sind die Flaggen der USA auf Halbmast. Ilan Ramon, 48 Jahre alt, hinterlässt Frau und 4 Kinder. Ihnen hatte er vor dem Start der Raumfähre vor 16 Tagen noch stolz seine Kollegen auf Fotos gezeigt. Voller Freude auf einen Einsatz, der heute in einer Katastrophe endete.
Und in Israel bin ich jetzt verbunden mit meinem Kollegen Christoph Sagorna. Christoph, gibt es erste, auch offizielle Reaktionen in Israel?
Also Ilan Ramon war hier zweifelsohne ein Nationalheld und von ganz besonderer Bedeutung für das ganze Land. Und das kann man ablesen an den Reaktionen, die es bisher gegeben hat. Wir haben vor einer Stunde etwa versucht, mit dem Verteidigungsministerium hier zu sprechen. Er war ja aktiver Kampfjet-Pilot. Und dort hieß es, wir werden noch nicht offiziell reagieren, bis wir offiziell Nachricht von der NASA haben, dass Ilan Ramon tot ist. Und vor wenigen Minuten hat Ministerpräsident Sharon eine Erklärung verbreiten lassen, in der er sagt, Israel und seine Bürger stehen an der Seite der Familien der Astronauten, besonders natürlich an der Seite der Familie von Ilan Ramon. Aber er hat auch mit keinem Wort erwähnt, dass Ilan Ramon tot ist. Es gibt so eine Art verzweifeltes Festhalten an dem Gedanken, dass möglicherweise jemand leben könnte. Und es hat natürlich auch damit zu tun, mit dem jüdischen Glauben, der sagt, jemand ist tot, kann für tot erklärt werden, wenn man seinen Körper gefunden hat oder wenn mindestens 3 Menschen seinen Tod bezeugen. Also man klammert sich verzweifelt an eine Möglichkeit, die es nicht mehr gibt.
Was bedeutet diese Katastrophe für Israel, auch für das israelische Selbstverständnis?
Wie ich eben schon sagte, er war ein Nationalheld und das nicht erst seit dem Start des Shuttles am 16. Januar, sondern im Grunde seit 4,5 Jahren, seit er ausgewählt wurde, der erste Israeli im All zu sein, seit er in Cape Canaveral ausgebildet wurde. Seit da verfolgen die Israelis jeden Schritt von ihm und spätestens dann seit dem 16. Januar, als er ins All geschossen wurde, gab es hier nur noch ein großes Thema neben den anderen politischen Themen. Und die Zeitungen waren vom ersten Tag voll davon. Blau-Weiß im Weltraum heißt es hier. Also die israelischen Nationalflaggen gehen in den Weltraum. Und es wurde hier rauf und runter berichtet über jede Kleinigkeit aus seinem Umfeld, aus seiner Familie, über seine Experimente. Es war das ganze nationale Prestige, was man sich erwartet hat von Ilan Ramon, ist heute mit dieser Katastrophe in Rauch aufgegangen. Und das Land ist einfach geschockt dadurch.
Können Sie uns ein bisschen mehr auch darüber sagen, was seine Aufgaben eigentlich waren an Bord der Raumfähre?
Er war im Grunde der einzige Nicht-Wissenschaftler. Er ist ausgebildeter Elektroingenieur und Computerspezialist und war bei der Armee Kampfflieger bis zum Schluss aktiv. Der ist Phantom geflogen, F-16, also hochmoderne Kampfflugzeuge, war bei Kriegseinsätzen dabei und hatte zunächst mal so eine eher minderwertige Aufgabe an Bord als Gastastronaut, nämlich er war Payload-Spezialist und war für die Ladung zuständig. Aber wir haben hier gehört, dass innerhalb der 4,5 Jahre, die er ausgebildet wurde in Amerika, er unheimlich gut integriert wurde in die Gruppe der Astronauten und dass man dann immer häufiger sagte, er ist schon einer von uns, er ist eigentlich ein richtiger Astronaut und der konnte dann auch wissenschaftliche Aufgaben übernehmen. Unter anderem war er ausgestattet mit einem Experiment hier von der Universität Tel Aviv, wo es darum ging, den Einfluss von Staubstürmen auf die Klimaverhältnisse hier im Nahen Osten zu ermitteln. Er hatte entsprechende Kameras dabei und sollte diese Art von Experimenten durchführen.
Ganz herzlichen Dank, Christoph Sagorna, live aus Jerusalem. Ja, schon einmal haben die USA eine ähnliche Katastrophe erlebt. Am 28. Januar 1986 explodierte die Raumfähre Challenger, nur rund 70 Sekunden nach dem Start. Auch damals starben 7 Astronauten, 5 Männer und 2 Frauen. Vor 17 Jahren hatte es im Vorfeld technische Probleme am Shuttle gegeben, die aber von der NASA als gering damals eingestuft wurden. Ilka S. Müller blickt zurück.
Cape Canaveral, Florida. Es ist kalt an diesem 28. Januar, an dem die ganze Nation auf den Start der Raumfähre Challenger blickt. Endlich hebt das Space Shuttle ab und macht sich auf den Weg ins All. Gespannt verfolgen Angehörige und Freunde das Spektakel. Doch dann, nach nur 73 Sekunden, eine Explosion. In 17 Kilometern Höhe wird die Challenger in Einzelstücke zerrissen. Live müssen auch die Eltern von Christa McAuliffe mit ansehen, was sich da ereignet. Niemand kann fassen, was passiert ist. Die Freude über den Start kehrt sich sofort in tiefe Trauer und Entsetzen. Neben den 6 Berufsastronauten war auch die Frau mit im Shuttle, die hier jetzt gerade ins Bild kommt, Christa McAuliffe, eine Lehrerin. Sie wollte erstmals aus dem Weltraum Unterricht für Schüler auf der Erde machen. Wegen ihr trug die Mission auch den Spitznamen Lehrerflug. Wochenlang war der Start der Challenger verschoben worden. Es hatte Schwierigkeiten gegeben und wie dieser beteiligte Ingenieur Roger Bourgeois vor 10 Jahren sagte, hätte das Unglück vermieden werden können. Er arbeitete für den Zulieferer Theo Coll und hatte schriftlich vor der größtmöglichen Katastrophe gewarnt. Wegen niedriger Außentemperaturen hatte sich an der Rakete Eis gebildet, wie Fotos zeigen. Auch die Dichtungsringe der Antriebsraketen waren eingefroren und konnten ihre Aufgabe, sich auszudehnen, nicht erfüllen. Es kam zur Katastrophe. Die Challenger sollte eigentlich für die USA ein Symbol moderner Technik sein. Die Entscheidung für den Start war eindeutig falsch, sagt der Astronaut Dick Covey vor 10 Jahren. Aber der Druck von außen sei so groß gewesen. Covey war 1986 Verbindungsmann zur Challenger und hilflos musste auch er mit ansehen, wie seine Freunde und Kollegen starben. Die Tragödie hatte weitreichende Folgen für das amerikanische Raumfahrtprogramm. Völlig neue Sicherheitsbestimmungen wurden eingeführt. Space-Shuttle-Flüge gab es für längere Zeit nicht.
In New York sind wir jetzt nochmal verbunden mit meinem Kollegen Christoph Lang. Christoph, nach 1986, also nach der Challenger-Katastrophe, ist das Raumfahrtprogramm ja mehrere Jahre lang unterbrochen worden. Was bedeutet der Absturz der Columbia jetzt auch gerade für die Raumstation ISS?
Das ist auch für die ein gewaltiger Rückschlag und damit für alle raumfahrenden Nationen, denn die IFF wird im Moment zusammengesetzt und das Space Shuttle ist das Haupttransportvehikel. Und im Moment sieht es ganz sicher so aus, als ob über lange Zeit, wahrscheinlich Jahre, kein weiteres Shuttle mehr starten wird. Wenn wir zurückblicken auf die Challenger, da waren es 2 Jahre, in denen umkonstruiert wurde. Erst dann kam der nächste Start. Mehr als 200 Einzelteile und Komponenten wurden geändert aufgrund des tragischen Unglücks damals. Der Jahrestag der Challenger-Katastrophe war übrigens erst am letzten Dienstag und die Crew der Columbia gedachte den verstorbenen Astronauten von damals im All, nicht wissend, dass ihnen ein ähnliches tragisches Schicksal bevorsteht.
Herzlichen Dank, Christoph Lang, für diese Informationen. Es gibt natürlich noch 3 weitere Raumfähren, und zwar die Endeavour, die Atlantis und die Discovery. Also der Zugang zur Raumfähre ist zumindest auch von der amerikanischen Seite aus weiterhin durchaus möglich. Natürlich gibt es auch die Möglichkeit, weiter mit russischen Raketen zur ISS zu fliegen. Im Moment befindet sich ja wieder eine 3-köpfige Dauerbesatzung dort auf der Raumfähre und die Ablösung wird dann aller Wahrscheinlichkeit nach wohl auch wieder mit einer russischen Rakete geschehen. Das war's für den Moment.
Und jetzt weiß Eberhard Pilz in Washington sicher noch etwas mehr als wir, denn die lange erwartete Pressekonferenz der NASA soll gerade jetzt im Moment stattfinden. Gibt es denn schon etwas Neues zum Hergang des Unglücks?
Leider gibt es noch nichts Neues. Die Pressekonferenz sollte vor 5 Minuten begonnen haben, aber sie hat noch nicht begonnen.
Thanks, Miles. Let me just say very quickly at the outset here how glad we are as your colleague that you're on the job this morning with your extensive experience and background in this area on this terribly tragic day. With me, Miles, in the studio here in Washington is Patty Davis, who covers aviation, has been talking to people at the Federal Aviation Administration, National Transportation Safety Board. Patty, what are they saying at this point?
Judy, the FAA says that it has been in contact with NASA on this shuttle accident. The FAA and the NTSB say that investigators are on standby, ready to go to the crash site. If there is, it can be a crash site. It looks like it's a very widely spread out site. If they're requested to go by NASA, now the National Transportation Safety Board, which is the agency that investigates air crashes, played a broad role, a spokesperson said, in the shuttle Challenger explosion. In the 1980s, the NTSB reconstructed parts of the shuttle for NASA and did a lot of the metallurgical work, looking at the composition of the metal debris from that accident. Now, aviation safety experts say what will be of critical importance In this accident, all the telemetry from the shuttle transmitted to mission control. The debris field expected, as I said, to be very, very wide since it broke up at some 200,000 feet in the air. The FAA says that it did not have any contact with the shuttle at all. It was still very high in the air. Air traffic control would have made contact with the shuttle when it reached about 60,000 feet. A spokeswoman telling me that at that point, air traffic control would have brought it into the airfield just like any other aircraft, moving aircraft, out of the way. No reports from American pilots, Southwest or Northwest pilots, that they saw any of this unfold or anything unusual. Normally they would report such activity to their bases and also to the Federal Aviation Administration, but certainly an unfolding situation, and we may hear more.
And Patty, I just want to, while you're here, clarify. I know Miles has been talking about this all morning. There have been witnesses who saw what appeared to be commercial jetliners in the area. Just to be very clear, commercial aircraft all over the world fly at a much lower altitude than where the shuttle was.
Right, we're talking a commercial aircraft being like 35,000 feet in the air. The shuttle at 200,000 feet. There's no way they could have come in contact with each other. The FAA is saying what their value at the very last stage as it's landing.
Entry point.
Right. The FAA is saying the value of perhaps an aircraft being in the area would be that perhaps the pilot may have seen something. But we haven't had any reports at this point of a pilot saying, yes, I saw it, and here's what I saw.
How much, at this point, normally there wouldn't be much contact, would there be, between NASA and the Federal Aviation Administration? I mean, clearly they have to coordinate to some extent, because when the shuttle's coming down, they don't want aircraft in the area.
Exactly. The Federal Aviation Administration puts TFRs, or temporary flight restrictions, into place around the airfield, around the path where the shuttle would be coming in. And as I said, FAA is taking over air traffic control-wise when that plane is coming in, when that shuttle is coming in to land, because it's coming into an airfield, and that's the FAA's job, is to get the shuttle down. But it just did not get to the point where air traffic had stepped in.
So just to summarize again, Patty, what is it that officials, both at the FAA and, I guess in particular now, the National Transportation Safety Board, will be doing? What is their job right now?
Well, they're waiting to get a request from NASA. They don't know. They all have crash investigators. They all have experts in crashes. They would be providing a support role, it looks like at this point, since this is not a commercial space vehicle. This is a U.S. government one. So NASA would most likely take the lead role in this. All these agencies would be supporting, bringing their experts in, safety experts saying that it's important that the NTSB, with its experts, get involved because they have expertise in this area.
That's right. All right, Patty Davis, thanks very much. And Miles, as I come back to you, I've been looking at the news wires, as I know you have, reading reports of people who live in Arkansas and Louisiana saying that they saw an explosion in the air. If you can help everyone understand a little bit better about the trajectory and where people in the United States might have first seen this happen and where it might have happened. It might not have been over Texas.
Hard to say, Judy, except that we do know the point at which they lost communication. Obviously, Mission Control in Houston is in constant communication with that space shuttle from the moment of launch, really all the way down to landing. It's not like the old days where you had those blackout periods in the Gemini and Apollo missions when they didn't hear from them for some time, and then they come back through after the chutes opened and everybody would breathe a sigh of relief. It's constant communication, so they can pinpoint the exact moment, and we're told it was right about 9 a.m. Eastern time, and we can pinpoint that location as being there right over kind of north-central Texas, right around Dallas. As a matter of fact, that WFAA affiliate tape that we've been showing you, you actually see what starts out as the appearance of a normal space shuttle, the comet-like streak, as you see it there, one fireball with one tail, and you almost witness the whole thing happening. You see the kind of the tail sort of, it acts in a strange way, and then boom, all of a sudden you see those small pieces right behind there. If you can put it in the telestrator, that could help out a little bit. But and then wait and watch. Okay, now additional pieces come off there, so you're almost seeing it right that moment over Dallas-Fort Worth, and that is really as good a piece of evidence as we have right now. Juxtapose that with the time frame, 9 a.m. Eastern time.
So Miles,
yeah.
I just want to say what the Associated Press anyway is reporting is the police near Shreveport, Louisiana, Police in Arkansas. The only town I see quoted is Stamps, Arkansas. I'm not sure where that is geographically, saying many people calling authorities saying they saw explosions in the sky. One man saying, I think we're being attacked. It's pretty clear there's some connection here.
Yes, clearly. I mean, traveling west to east, that all fits with what we're seeing. And at that altitude, on a clear morning, a big, wide swath of the ground would have the opportunity to see this, even if debris didn't actually rain down in that particular area. You'd be able to see it for many, many miles at that altitude. I recall after the Challenger incident, I was in Tampa, Florida. Now, the Challenger blew up right about in the same altitude, 150, 200,000 feet. We could see the cloud, the remnants of the Challenger, from Tampa, 150 miles away. So that gives you a sense of the clear view vision that people might have, and that would jive with all those reports that we're seeing. We have with us from Dallas, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, Senator from Texas. Senator Hutchinson, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you.
Tell us have you had any direct contact with the search and rescue effort at all? Tell us what you know about efforts to preserve the debris and keep people away from it.
Well, I've talked to the Deputy Administrator at NASA just to, first of all, offer my office if they needed to get here quickly, because I'm sure they are going to have search and rescue teams all over North and East Texas. They know that they have debris found in Nacogdoches and certainly near Dallas. So I've talked to them, and they are just devastated by this, of course, and we want to be helpful in every way that we can to try to get to the bottom of this. I am on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee in the Senate. I'm sure that we will have hearings to talk about what went wrong and just try to learn from this tragic accident so that we will know what to expect in the future and try to make safety a first priority.
Senator, inevitably, in the wake of all this, there will be discussion about the merits of putting people in harm's way in this manner, of taking the risk. Is it worth it?
Well, I think clearly anytime we are pushing the envelope in research and technology, there are going to be tragedies. We have had the terrible Challenger tragedy before this. I would never want America to walk away from being in the forefront of the research. It has been wonderful for our country, but I do think we have to appreciate the test pilots who are willing to become astronauts, because they are taking a huge risk, and they know they are, and they're willing to do it to keep America in the forefront of the space research, which has been so valuable to our country.
So I guess then, this could be one of those forks in the road when it comes to your role and Congress's role. One fork says, let's end manned spaceflight. The other fork would be, maybe it's time to start thinking about a new generation of vehicles which can carry humans to the final frontier.
Well, I think the new generation, the new mission of NASA is the way to go. I would never step back from America's preeminence in space. I think the next missions are going to be medically related, and certainly we want to know what is out there. Just look at what the satellite technology has brought to our country in security. It's making all the difference in our war, the predators, and the ability to communicate through satellites. All of this happened because we have been willing to push that envelope and be first in space and make sure that we learn the technology that keeps us in the forefront. So walking away from space research would never be an option. What we have to do is make sure that we have a clear mission, that we fully fund NASA so that we have safety as a priority, and we need to appreciate these wonderful test pilots who are doing so much for our country. Their mission is every bit as important as our national security and national defense.
Well, that's an amen moment. We'll leave it at that. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson of Texas, we wish you well in the near term, helping out with this search and rescue operation, and also in the long term as you deal with the investigation and the discussion which will follow in the months to come. Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson from Dallas. We have been getting some emails all morning from people who saw various things, some of them with still photographs. Let's bring in one of those witnesses. Waylon Wagner from Henderson, Texas is with us now. Mr. Wagner, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, I can.
All right, if we could bring up your still image, which is on the computer in the control room there. We can take a look at the still image you captured. Tell me what you saw, heard, how you came to be outside with a camera.
Well, it was about 8 o'clock this morning, and I went outside on my patio just to have my coffee, like I normally do. And our house faces basically the south. And I was looking out towards kind of the northwest, and it was coming over our tree line, and it was just a very thin vapor line at that time. And I thought, wow, you know, what a beautiful meteor, you know, and we did not...
Mr. You did not know that it was a shuttle necessarily?
No, sir. Okay. We had gone out to eat last night, and we didn't know anything about the shuttle re-entering today.
I see. Okay, go ahead.
So I was standing there, you know, and it just got bigger, and you could see more smoke coming off of it. And about that time, I hollered at my wife, and I said, come out here and look at this meteor, you know. And she ran out there, and she said, let me go get my camera. So she run back in and got her camera and took these pictures. Now, these pictures here are, you know, it might have been a minute or so after that. And these were more in the southeast when these pictures were taken. And then she's actually got some pictures of them, of the vapor trail as they went in behind the tree.
Did you hear anything, or was it so far away that you couldn't?
Do what?
Did you hear anything unusual, or was it so far away you couldn't hear anything unusual?
No. At this time, after we'd taken the pictures and everything, we hurried back into the house, and we had the Weather Channel on. And we thought, well, if it's a meteor, maybe they'll show something. And then the newscaster that was on had come on and read us the deal about the shuttle. Well, then we went immediately to your station, and then we saw it. And then just maybe a minute or a minute and a half, the house started rumbling.
Really?
And we're going, oh, no.
Wow.
You know. Wow. And
so the rumble sort of occurred sometime thereafter.
Yes, sir. We had already come back in the house and was watching the TV, and then we realized what it was the shuttle had re-entered and everything. And we stepped outside again and just listened to it. It was kind of like a big thundering noise, like a thundercloud would cause in the distance, and it just kept on and on and on. And we just kind of sat back down here at the TV and looked at each other, you know, and just all this.
So it might have just taken that much time for the sound to reach you, in other words.
Well, yeah, it was probably at least a minute, you know, minute to a minute and a half, and then we started hearing the sound of it.
All right, we're going to leave it at that. Waylon Wagner, Henderson, Texas, thank you for sending that image, which shows, to my way of counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 distinct big pieces of the Space Shuttle Columbia at that moment in time over Henderson, Texas. CNN's Robert Novak sat down with the new NASA Administrator, Sean O'Keefe, just last week, had a lengthy interview with him, talked a lot about where he is headed, and one of the things that was uppermost on Sean O'Keefe's mind has been the announcement just now, a little more than a week old, of a new Educator Mission Specialist program. Really sort of the fulfillment of the Teacher in Space mission of Krista McAuliffe, Space Shuttle Challenger, 17 years ago. NASA finally getting to the stage where it was ready to begin thinking about flying teachers once again. Barbara Morgan, Krista McAuliffe's understudy, was due to fly at the end of this year, November. And additional teachers were encouraged to apply to fly in subsequent missions, about one a year for the foreseeable future. It was a time when, at least last week, when Bob Novak sat down with Sean O'Keefe, there was a lot of talk about bringing civilians into space. What else did he have to say, Bob?
Miles, I had mentioned to Administrator O'Keefe that the astronauts used to be household words, and people really didn't know the astronauts now, and I wondered if the lack of public interest and support in the space program was a problem of not knowing the astronauts and whether they could get to know them better. He mentioned then Barbara Morgan, and he also went on to say this, and this has a poignant sound now as we listen to it. Let's listen to what the Administrator O'Keefe said.
We also need to get to know a lot more about, again, guys like Ken Bowersox, or Rick Husband, the guy who is the commander of the current expedition that's underway right now. Those are the kinds of folks that we, I think, ought to admire, look up to, and realize the extraordinary capabilities they have and the sacrifice that they make each and every day on our behalf as explorers. It really is an extraordinary group of people.
Of course, we now get to know these people much better with this tragedy, Miles. And the Administrator O'Keefe, who is not a space expert at all, he was brought in there because he's a great numbers cruncher, he's a good management man, former Secretary of the Navy, he was deputy man at the Office of Management and Budget, trying to make do with kind of short rations for NASA, trying to increase public support. Now he's got even a bigger task, and that is to explain to Congress and indeed to the nation what happened today. And there will undoubtedly be people, naysayers will say manned space is too risky, but as Senator Hutchison said, and I'm sure, I know that Sean O'Keefe will say that it is essential that we continue the manned space program.
CNN's Bob Novak, who had the last lengthy interview with Sean O'Keefe before we hear from him today. 1 p.m. Eastern, that's right about now, is when we expect to hear from him. We will bring it to you the moment it begins, but let's take an opportunity to recap. As we take a look at pictures captured by our affiliate WFAA, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. local time, what you're seeing are the final moments of the Space Shuttle Columbia as it broke up into several pieces, at least 5 big ones that we are able to count, disintegrated at an altitude of 200,000 feet, traveling 12,500 miles an hour, some 15 or 16 minutes prior to its anticipated landing at the Kennedy Space Center. Crew of 7 aboard had conducted a 16-day science mission, traveled 6.5 million miles in the course of that, and had, by most accounts, a relatively flawless mission. The crew, led by Commander Rick Husband, featured Mark Brown, Laurel Clark, Kapana Chawla, Willie McCool, the pilot, Mike Anderson, and Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli to fly in space, featured a 16-day science mission where they conducted in excess of 80 separate experiments on themselves, on rodents, on all kinds of things, physical sciences, trying to learn more about how microgravity affects human beings as well as other phenomenon. By all accounts, it was a successful scientific run, and then inexplicably, at 9 a.m. Eastern, just about that time that tape was shot, we lost communication. Now, let me just tell you how a shuttle, this is a little different than I'm sorry, this anticipated something else. It was coming in this way across Texas, right about this point is where the breakup occurred. Should have continued down right along the rim of the Gulf Coast there, through the Panhandle of Florida and down into the Orlando area, and make a steep right turn to runway 33 at the Kennedy Space Center. That was the altitude and speed at the time of the breakup. Tremendous forces on a shuttle. The whole process of a deorbit burn begins in the Indian Ocean when they fire rockets which slow the shuttle down just enough for it to begin falling out of orbit. The shuttle essentially is in a constant free fall around the planet at 17,500 miles an hour, sort of the perfect balance between its speed and the forces of gravity. Slows it down just enough to begin that precipitous drop. It begins a series of broad S-turns to dissipate heat, or to trade, I should say, speed for heat. It's covered with thermal insulating tiles, which are designed to protect the aluminum frame of the shuttle from that tremendous heat, which can exceed 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Those tiles are a very fragile thing, which have caused a lot of maintenance headaches over the years for NASA as it tries to keep the Space Shuttle fleet flying now into its 22nd year. All right, we have CNN's Gary Tuchman on the scene at the Kennedy Space Center, right near where that press conference with the NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe is set to begin. Gary, I know you're just kind of hitting the ground running there, but if you can give me a sense of what the scene is like.
Miles, as you might expect, it's a very difficult, sad, and confusing time for the employees and visitors here at the Kennedy Space Center. I just spent some time about 30 minutes ago at the Visitor Center where tourists come, and Saturday's a very busy tourist day here at the Space Center. And there's a huge flagpole with the American flag flying at half-staff at the Visitor Center. And I saw a family, a husband, wife, and their 2 children stepping out of their car to go on the tour of the Kennedy Space Center. And there were a lot of people running around in the flag and half-staff, and the woman looked at me and saw I was with CNN and said, "What's going on here?" She had no idea what had happened. I quietly informed her what had happened, and she burst into tears. And that gives you an idea of what people are going through here. There are flags at half-staff throughout the complex. There's a sign, and you've probably seen this, Miles, when you've been at the Cape, when you drive in, and it tells you how many days it is until the next launch, how many days it is until the next landing. And it says 0 days until the next space shuttle landing. And it is a very eerie case of deja vu for a lot of us. I was here in 1986. At that point, I know you, Miles, worked in Tampa for a local station. I worked in West Palm Beach, and I was here that day after the Challenger exploded. It's the very same terrifying, terrible feeling here of deja vu almost 2 decades later. Exact same week of the year, first day of February today, January 28th, 17 years ago. But it's a very sad day here at the Kennedy Space Center. Miles?
Gary Tuckman, thank you very much. As we look at this picture, which I believe came down a little while ago, the flag at half-staff there beside the countdown clock at the Kennedy Space Center. In the distance, you see Launch Pad 39A, which is exactly the point at which Columbia left the planet 16 days ago. About 3 miles from where that flag lies, sort of to the back of the camera, is the shuttle landing facility where it should have arrived 9:16 a.m. this morning. But as we have been telling you, that did not happen. It disintegrated shortly after losing communication with mission control over the state of Texas, somewhat ironically. Disintegrated into several pieces at high altitude and high speed, raining down debris over a huge, huge swath of Texas and into Louisiana. And there you see half-staff at the White House, live pictures there. This one from the North Lawn, as we see the nation in the earliest stages of beginning to mourn a brave crew of people who understood these risks and yet willingly, gladly embraced them. Let's send it over to Heidi Collins. We'll get another update for you. We want to let you know that the minute Sean O'Keefe begins talking, we'll bring it to you.
Yes, we will, Miles. We want to let everybody know. We're going to recap the details now of the tragic ending of the Space Shuttle Columbia mission, and what a tragedy it is. Here's what we know. NASA lost communication with Columbia just moments before it was scheduled to touch down in Florida at 9:16 Eastern this morning. Officials say they were given no indication of trouble. Meanwhile, television images captured the craft separating into pieces as it streaked across the Texas sky. An investigation began almost immediately to find out what happened. An official in Washington says an act of terrorism was considered highly unlikely. Spectators who went to Kennedy Space Center to see the shuttle landing were left waiting.
We're shocked. We're at a loss for words. We don't know what to think. We feel so sad and sorry for the families of people that have been lost. Just hope they're with God.
Search and rescue teams fanned out across south central Texas looking for debris from the spacecraft. Officials warn people to stay away from anything that might look like a piece of potentially hazardous wreckage. Among the 7 Columbia crew members, Commander Rick Husband was at the helm along with pilot William McCool. Colonel Ilan Ramon, Israel's first man in space. Also, payload commander Michael Anderson, mission specialists David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, and Dr. Laurel Clark. Miles, we're going to send it back over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Heidi Collins, for offering a good recap for those of you who might just be joining us about what has turned out to be a tragic day, February 1st, 2003, the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia. We are expecting a news conference from the NASA administrator, Sean O'Keefe, to talk about the picture you see on your screen right now, which is that stream of multiple fireballs, a couple explosions there. You see the puffs of smoke coming out of it as Columbia streaked across Texas about 9 a.m. Eastern this morning, losing communication with mission control, right about the same time doing exactly what you're seeing here, which is breaking up, in-flight breakup. And that is all we can tell you about what happened, because we don't have a lot of information in the early stages of things like this, of course. And of most current concern right now to officials is to secure the debris, which has rained down on a huge, huge swath of the United States from Texas into Louisiana, hundreds of miles of debris. And that debris, with its toxic brew associated with it, is to be avoided at all costs. Please let authorities know if you know of some, but please, by all means, don't touch it. You could hurt yourself badly, and we don't want that to happen on top of everything else that has happened today. Let's bring in Barbara Starr, our Pentagon correspondent, to see what, if anything, the Pentagon is aware of on this story. Barbara?
Miles, we can tell you now that U.S. military forces from Fort Hood, Texas, are moving into position. Fort Hood, Texas, just announcing that it has launched helicopters, 4 helicopters now in the air, participating in what they are calling a search and rescue mission. But of course, it is really search and recovery of the debris and the crew of Columbia. They tell us that this task force will be comprised of helicopters from several military elements at Fort Hood, Texas. As we said, 4 helicopters now in the air. They will also be accompanied by military police from the 89th Military Police Brigade at Fort Hood. We are told as they locate debris, military police will now move in and secure those debris sites. Fort Hood is also telling us this will be a 24/7 operation, that they will use their Black Hawk helicopters during the daylight hours to search for debris, and once darkness falls, they will move in with what are called Kiowa Warrior helicopters. These are helicopters, of course, with night vision capability and night vision sensors. Again, the military police will move in to secure the debris sites until the debris can be removed in a safe manner. We are also told that, coincidentally, this was a drill weekend for the Texas National Guard, that they have additional helicopters and personnel that are on standby, even a C-130 aircraft, and that they will move in once the order comes down. But so far, it is the elements from Fort Hood, Texas, and of course, quite coincidentally, Fort Hood this very weekend was getting organized to begin its deployment to the Persian Gulf for possible military operations against Iraq. Miles?
So, Barbara, the key point here is to try to preserve all this debris. And do you get the sense that there will be enough forces marshaled to this effort?
Yes, Fort Hood, Texas, to be quite clear, is a huge military installation in Texas, 42,000 personnel, and of course, the Texas National Guard has a lot of assets at its disposal, troops, vehicles, airborne assets. So between the governor of Texas activating any National Guard elements down there on a state level and any requests that NASA may make to the Pentagon here today, there should be plenty of capability to move into these various sites very quickly, secure them, and recover that debris.
All right,
Miles.
Barbara Starr, thank you very much, and stay close, please. I told you a little while ago that this was a tough week for NASA already. January 27th, 1967, the Apollo 1 fire. Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee. My apologies, I couldn't remember Chaffee's name a little while ago. It's been a long morning. Died in that fire. January 28th, 1986, the Challenger disaster. It exploding 70 some odd seconds after liftoff. On that anniversary, the 28th, the commander of the Columbia mission, Rick Husband, radioed down some words of remembrance.
Okay, well then we've got an announcement that we'd like to make on behalf of the STS-107 crew. And it goes like this. It is today that we remember and honor the crews of Apollo 1 and Challenger. They made the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives in service to their country and for all mankind. Their dedication and devotion to the exploration of space was an inspiration to each of us, and still motivates people around the world to achieve great things in service to others. As we orbit the Earth, we will join the entire NASA family for a moment of silence in their memory. Our thoughts and prayers go to their families as well.
Rick Husband, the commander of the Space Shuttle Columbia, on January 28th, 2003, commemorating the loss of Apollo 1 and Challenger, the ultimate sacrifice, as he put it. Jerry Lininger, shuttle veteran, man who spent a good deal of time aboard Mir, joining us now. It's hard to listen to those words, isn't it, Jerry?
Yeah, very hard. I think every astronaut feels the same way, though. You know, there's a lot of people that have gone before us, and the people have the courage to do the things that they did. They know the danger, and we're all proud of them.
What, you know, the risks are so well known to the astronauts and their families, and yet many Americans really don't have a sense of it, do they? I know you talk to people all the time. Do you get the sense that people had this feeling that it was almost a routine type of operation?
I think they do, Miles, and especially the re-entry. I think the liftoff, people realize, wow, look at the power. They know it's a dangerous operation, but the re-entry, very dynamic. You're right on the edge of the envelope. You're bouncing hard, fireball around you. Any astronaut, any person that's ever been through that experience knows that you are very close to disaster, and it's just the nature of what we do out in space.
Well, what you're unleashing is this tremendous potential energy, and that clearly is the focus. It gets a lot of people's attention, including even the layman would understand that that is a difficult thing. Let's talk about re-entry, though, for a moment. A time, as you say, when perhaps our guard is let down a little bit. It nevertheless, when you're going from 17,500 miles an hour over the Indian Ocean to 0 at the end of the runway, there's a lot of things happening in between, aren't there?
A lot of things happening. Shuttle is at the point of the problem today, is under computer control, and very fine computer control, and you sort of rock the shuttle back and forth as you come down during re-entry, and that sort of dissipates some of the heat, lets some of the stress off. But it's a very dynamic process, all starting with the shuttle actually going upside down and backwards, firing the engines, as you mentioned, halfway around the world, then getting wings level, and then starting to hit some of the atmosphere. And as you get lower and lower, you hit more and more atmosphere, and even though the speed is decreasing, you're hitting, you know, a wall, essentially, and you're diving down into it, and it really heats up.
It's, give us a sense of what that ride is like as you could do these big, broad S-turns. It's a very severe maneuver, isn't it?
The maneuver's not so severe, it's just the whole shuttle. I remember my first flight, the commander, who very experienced, Dick Richards, he as we're coming down, bouncing around, he turns around and looks at me, and his eyes are this big, and just says, wow, Jerry, isn't this, you know, wild ride? And here's an experienced naval aviator off aircraft carriers all his life. So I think anyone, again, that experiences that, it is just one very dynamic ride. I said it sounded like a locomotive train going to run me down, you know, right behind me. And again, my first flight, I sort of looked over my shoulder to make sure it wasn't a train. And that's the normal re-entry. So, you know, if anything goes a little bit wrong, it can be tragic, and, you know, that's what happened today.
Well, and give us a sense, because while you're inside that flight deck and you're looking outside, you're seeing very conclusive evidence of the amount of heat which envelops a space shuttle.
It is all around you. You look out, actually the back window, you could see it too, and it's sort of a collapsing, kind of a northern lights look, everything very fluid, plasma moving around, and it is just, you know, orange, red, big fireball all around you. So, you know, obviously when things did not go well, and once one piece comes off and you lose control, there's a lot of dynamic pressure, a lot of heat. And that's what you saw in all the films that you're looking at, with the different segments coming off, heating up, and multiple explosions, if you will. That's just debris going through a heat tunnel.
Now, and the way that the orbiter's airframe is protected, it is, after all, made of aluminum, which would certainly melt in that, if it encountered that level of heat. The way it is done is with lots of blankets, thermal blankets, but more importantly, especially on the bottom side, those black tiles, which are designed, they're ceramic, they're designed to absorb and shed the heat and protect the shuttle. It's kind of a fragile system in a sense, isn't it?
It is, Miles. If you ever felt one of those tiles, you know, it's an amazing thing. It kind of feels like a piece of styrofoam. It is that light, but you put a blowtorch on one end and you put your hand on the other side and you don't feel the heat. So you know, the engineers came up with an incredible product there. And again, we don't know exactly what happened. All I can tell you, though, is the belly of the shuttle is well protected. But if you get in the wrong orientation at any moment during that re-entry, you are not protected on all sides. And so, you know, once you start coming apart, there's nothing you can do.
So what's a possibility then to look at would be if somehow the shuttle was not in the perfect ideal orientation for some reason. That obviously would be high on the list of things that investigators would probe.
I'm sure they'll look very closely at that. They'll also look at some better film. Hopefully we had some telescopes pointing that way. Usually you follow the shuttle in, you might be able to see that initial moment where things you know, came apart. I think software, some of the control systems, guidance and control systems may have failed and get you in slightly the wrong orientation. The other thing you mentioned during liftoff, a piece of debris possibly hitting the shuttle. If you have a spot that's exposed to that extreme heat and it melts through the shell and then hits a control surface, you can get in trouble very quickly. All those things will be looked at very hard, I'm sure. Try to put the debris field together, try to look for clues and evidence to make sure it never happens again. And I guarantee the astronauts on board want us to keep pressing this thing and to keep going back to space and to make the improvements and not make their sacrifice something that's in vain. So I'm sure they want us to put the pieces together, figure out what went wrong, and press on.
We should remind our viewers that we're 20 minutes past the time appointed for Sean O'Keefe to speak. We do expect a statement from the NASA administrator from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where he was to welcome back the crew any minute now. We will bring it to you the moment it begins. Looking over my shoulder, still not there yet. Jerry, as we get into this scenario of something falling off during ascent, we want to be careful because it is so early, and I hate to get too far down the road of speculation, but it is common knowledge that there was a piece that fell off that external tank, struck some portion of the... let's go. I'll tell you what, we're going to go to the press conference right now. Let's go to the Kennedy Space Center live now via NASA TV.
About STS-107, we will have no questions today, just a few brief remarks.
As indicated earlier, we'll make a statement today, and then at this point, and a little later this afternoon at about 3 o'clock Eastern Time, there'll be a full technical briefing conducted from the Johnson Space Center. So at this point, we're just going to give you the circumstances as we understand them leading up to this particular tragedy today. This is indeed a tragic day for the NASA family, for the families of the astronauts who flew on STS-107, and likewise tragic for the nation. Immediately upon indication of a loss of communications on STS-107, at a little after 9 a.m. this morning, we began our contingency plan to preserve all the information relative to the flight activities. I immediately advised the President and the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Tom Ridge, at the point after landing was due to have occurred at 9:16, spoke to them very briefly thereafter to advise that we had lost contact with the Shuttle Orbiter Columbia and STS-107 crew. They offered, the President specifically offered, full and immediate support to determine what the appropriate steps were thereafter to be taken. We then spent the next hour and a half working through the detail and information of what we have received, and Bill Reedy will walk you through the specifics of those operational and technical issues here in just a moment. Thereafter, we have met with the family members of the astronauts who were here at Kennedy Space Center and are soon to be departing back to Johnston, to Houston. The President has called and spoken to them to express our deepest national regrets. We have assured them that we will begin the process immediately to recover their loved ones and understand the cause of this tragedy. At this time, we have no indication that the mishap was caused by anything or anyone on the ground. We've assembled a mishap investigation team that immediately was assembled upon the point of past the stage in which the orbiter was to have landed here at Kennedy Space Center a little after 9:30, and that team in turn is coordinating on a regular basis on all the facts that are pertaining to this from the Johnson Space Center, and a rapid response team from here at the Kennedy Space Center, as well as participants from the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. In addition to these internal efforts, we have also appointed a mishap investigation board, an external group of people who are independent from NASA, who will immediately be charged with the opportunity to look at all the information that was immediately locked down right after our absence of communications. Each of these individuals are safety and mission assurance related officials in other federal departments of the federal government, from the Air Force, from the Navy, from the Department of Transportation, and across the federal expanse. The investigation team will also be chaired by an individual contacted to serve who is external to the federal agencies, and will have the opportunity to coordinate all the information again from an external view. So we'll be conducting both the internal activity as well as an external review immediately to ascertain the causes and circumstances under which this tragedy occurred. We've pulled together all the federal agencies and local governments as well. In discussion several times this morning with Secretary Tom Ridge, the effort is heavily underway to coordinate an understanding of exactly where the orbiter path had taken it from West Texas towards the Kennedy Space Center here in Florida, and to make sure that the material on the ground is secured so that the investigation can begin promptly. We would urge anyone who believes they have discovered or found any material to stay away from it and to please contact local officials. The local first responder groups for emergency services and so forth have been authorized and directed by Secretary Tom Ridge to assist in all manner. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is coordinating that effort on the part of the Department of Homeland Security. I was here this morning with the families of the astronauts and their friends. It started out as a pretty happy morning, awaiting the landing of STS-107. And we had highly anticipated their return because we couldn't wait to congratulate them for their extraordinary performance and their excellent efforts on the science mission on this very important flight. They dedicated their lives to pushing the scientific challenges for all of us here on Earth. And they dedicated themselves to that objective and did it with a happy heart, willingly, and with great enthusiasm. The loss of this valiant crew is something we will never be able to get over, and certainly the families of all of them, we have assured we will do everything we can possibly do to guarantee that they work their way through this horrific tragedy. We ask the members of the media to honor that too. To please respect their privacy and please understand the tragedy that they are going through at this time. We will help the media assure that be the case as well. We trust that the prayers of the nation will be with them and with their families. And again, a more courageous group of people you could not have hoped to know than the families of these crew members. And an extraordinary, extraordinary group of astronauts who gave their lives and did it in a way that they knew exactly the risk, but never, ever, do we ever want to see a circumstance where something like this could ever happen. And we diligently dedicate ourselves every single day to assuring these things don't occur. And when they do, we have to act responsibly, accountably, and that's exactly what we will do. To give you more of the operational detail of what has occurred here since 9 a.m. this morning, the Associate Administrator for Spaceflight, a former astronaut, retired captain of the United States Navy, former test flight pilot, Bill Reedy, who has commanded 2 separate missions previously and as an astronaut, and is now, again, our Associate Administrator for Spaceflight, and has worked with me all morning, along with all of us here at Kennedy Space Center, to work through the details of the events as we know them, and to present to you the facts that we understand them. Again, the technical details that are being worked very diligently now will be covered again at 3 p.m. this afternoon out of the Johnson Space Center. With that, let me turn it over to Captain Bill Reedy.
It's a truly difficult day for all of us. Many of us were standing alongside the runway waiting to celebrate their triumphant return after a 16-day science mission. I think you could tell from the downlink that they loved what they were doing, and they thought what they were doing was extremely important, pushing back those boundaries in science. At 9 o'clock, we heard that they had lost data from the spacecraft, and it appears that that was at about 200,000 feet, about Mach 18. The loss of data was somewhere over north central Texas, and at the planned landing time of 9:16, we initiated our contingency action plan, called the Rescue Coordination Center, and initiated a search and rescue effort. Sadly, I think from the video that's available, it does not appear that there were any survivors. We have currently impounded all the data, including all the pre-flight certification of flight readiness for STS-107. And at this point, I'd have to say it's too early to speculate about the exact cause. Obviously, we're looking at all the data that we have available. Those people that have videos, those people that have still pictures, we'll urge you to contact NASA so that we can coordinate those things that might be available. And to reiterate what the administrator said, those people that may find debris, do not touch it, do not move it. Contact your local authorities, have them impound it and secure the area so that our technical specialists will be able to piece together the puzzle so that we can resolve what happened. Our immediate focus is on the crew families, and we spent some time with them. The president called. I'd have to say the families are bearing up with an incredible amount of dignity considering their loss. We all grieve for them. We all pray with them for the crew. But one thing came across loud and clear when visiting with them is they knew that the crew was absolutely dedicated to the mission that they were performing. And I think you could see that in the video downlink. They believed in what they were doing. And in the conversations with the crew and their families, they said that we must find what happened and fix it and move on. And we can't let their sacrifice be in vain. Today was a very stark reminder that this is a very risky endeavor, pushing back the frontiers in outer space, and after 113 flights, unfortunately, people have a tendency to look at it as something that is more or less routine. Well, I can assure you it is not. Each and every time I flew, each and every time my colleagues flew, we treated that with the respect that it deserved from a professional standpoint. And I have to say that as the one responsible for shuttle and station within the NASA, that I know that the people of NASA did everything possible preparing for this flight to make it as perfect as possible. My promise to the crew and to the crew families is that the investigation that we have just launched will find the cause, we'll fix it, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Again, we know you all have questions, and we will have a news briefing at 3 o'clock, and we'll give you that opportunity at that time. Thank you.
We just heard finally there from Lisa Malone, Public Affairs Officer with the Kennedy Space Center at NASA. She was preceded by Bill Reedy, the Associated Administrator for Human Spaceflight, who was himself preceded by the Administrator of NASA, Sean O'Keefe, telling us where the investigation is headed and offering some reminders of the risks involved in all of this. An independent investigative team is already being assembled, which will look at this entire thing outside the federal government with some impartiality and come to some conclusions as to what might have caused Columbia to break up in flight over Texas, hurtling along at Mach 18, we now know, 200,000 feet. Bill Reedy saying, I can assure you we will find the cause, fix it, and we will move on. It was almost 3 years from the Challenger explosion to the return to flight, Space Shuttle Discovery. Just to put that in perspective for you, 2 years and a healthy dose of a third before NASA flew again. And these kinds of things, depending on what it is determined it is, do take that long before NASA and the country, for that matter, can feel comfortable with moving ahead with piloted space flight. The 113th mission of the Space Shuttle fleet, and the second now to end in catastrophe, this time at the end of the mission, not immediately after launch. We are going to hear additional technical information, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and I don't know who exactly is going to be participating in that news conference, but we will, of course, bring you that. That's coming up an hour and a half from now. We've had an opportunity to isolate for you the precise moment when Mission Control first had a sense that there was a problem. The communication loss, the loss of data, so-called telemetry on those computer screens. If we have that ready to go, let's listen in to that moment, and you can see how the conversation played out.
Columbia continuing toward Florida, now approaching the New Mexico-Texas border. Altitude 40 miles. Speed 13,200 miles per hour. Range to touchdown 1,400 miles. The shuttle in the left bank with wings angled about 57 degrees to horizontal.
You're listening, by the way, to James Hartsfield, Public Affairs Officer.
And Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages, and we did not copy your last.
Roger.
That's it. Roger, and then mid-communication, nothing. Let's wait another moment here. Tire pressure will obviously be something we'll be looking at. Space Shuttle tires are under tremendous high pressure. They're filled with nitrogen and inert gas. That might be one area where they will be exploring. As we've been telling you, one of the keys for those people in mission control and all of this is preservation of the data. The moment something like this happens, they're supposed to capture what exists on their screens, gather any notes, anything on paper, put it all together, box it up, and put it in a place where it can be ultimately viewed by those who will be leading this investigation. That process still continues at Mission Control in Houston. Matter of fact, We have a live picture there of Mission Control. You can see that they're still at their consoles there, long now after the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia. Jerry Lininger, I hope you had an opportunity to hear Sean O'Keefe and Bill Reedy. Did you not?
Yes, I did. And, you know, Bill's a good guy, and yeah, I'm sure everyone's doing everything they can.
Yeah, that point about finding it, fixing it, and moving on. Can you, in this dark, dark moment, can you offer us some assurance that that is, in fact, going to happen?
Well, I think based on the people that I worked with at NASA and the whole organization, the professionalism that they show, you know, we got other people who are going to follow in their footsteps, and you don't want to repeat a day like today. And so I have 100% assurance in my heart that people are going to look at it as hard as they can and really try to get to the root of what caused this tragedy today.
Tire pressure indications. What are we, if should we do anything? Should we make anything of that, do you think?
You know, I think any abnormality that was, as you mentioned earlier, you know, the tile or an object hitting possibly the orbiter during launch, they're going to look through every part of that mission, any indication that there was some kind of problem. Tire pressure sounds like a minor thing, but perhaps not. I mean, the tires are protected, obviously, during re-entry. And if the tire pressure is increasing, you know, heat expands things. And so if that was the case, possibly there was a problem in that critical area. You know, well, you look at all the data, you look at anything slightly off, and you try to make sense of it.
If those tires were heated up, they exploded, certainly that would take the doors off and expose the underbody of the shuttle, which, of course, it would be extremely vulnerable at that point. Hydraulic lines going through there, that sort of thing.
That's correct, Miles. So again, if when you're trying to piece this thing together, you'll look at any abnormality, try to put the whole picture together, look at the debris. Unfortunately, the debris, of course, is going to have re-entered itself, so you're going to have a lot of molten metal, and it's going to be very hard to put those pieces back together. But you try to piece it together, and then you try to come up with what caused the problem. And as Bill Reedy just said, you fix it and you press on.
Let's talk for a moment, go back to the beginning of the mission, and this piece that apparently fell off, the external tank, whether it was a piece of ice or a piece of foam, maybe a little bit of both. I don't know if we still have that tape in the gate ready for air, but we can talk about it nonetheless. What happened was there was a piece that fell and struck the left wing. Without getting too far down the road here as well, that obviously is an area that will be looked at. They knew about it shortly after launch, looked at that, and determined after some excruciating analysis that there wasn't a great deal of concern, as best I could discern. I know you weren't plugged into the engineering analysis of that, but this is, in general, a big area of concern at NASA.
Sure. You know, if you've been to the pad, I know, Miles, but a lot of people don't appreciate the fact just the sound wave bouncing off the ground and back up can shake the shuttle and damage things. And so there's a flush of water, literally a flood of water that goes on underneath the launch pad, not to dissipate the heat, but to absorb some of the sound, because all that sound waves come back, could shake the shuttle. Ice forming on the external tank has been a problem in the past. That breaks loose during the flight, during liftoff. So all those things are looked at very carefully. The good news on that, I guess, is that they have some cameras positioned down there, very good cameras that are looking very closely. And again, the analysis 16 days ago was that it looks like it didn't do anything that's of concern. Bottom of the shuttle, you can't afford to lose a tile or two. It depends on the area. But you can get back in even with some tiles off if it's not in a critical area. So, you know, you look at it, but I'm sure they're going to re-examine that and look even harder now at that whole situation.
All right. Jerry, I would appreciate it if you could sit still for us for just a little bit, stay close. We're joined here in Atlanta by Randy Avera, who was an engineer with the shuttle program in the dark days of the Challenger era. Mr. Avera, good to have you with us.
Good to be here, Miles.
Take us back to those days, the investigation, the way the investigation was conducted, and try to relate that to what's happening right now.
Well, we were always working very hard to provide the most
perfect orbiter and space shuttle vehicle for launch. A tremendous amount of test and checkout is involved, and of course training and crew readiness. And on the day of the crash, as today, everyone was very disappointed, very shocked and grieved. And you have to pick up your spirits and do the work. As John Young, one of the astronauts, the commander of the first mission, has always said, just do your job. And it's time now for NASA and the American people and people around the world that support space exploration to do our jobs. There's going to be a lot of forensic science that's going to be required to do a thorough investigation of this particular accident. And the Space Shuttle Orbiter is a very complex design of electrical, software, mechanical systems and structures and flight dynamics that are similar to the X-15 experimental aircraft that flew during the 1960s.
Of course, one key difference with the X-15 is the X-15's body itself was designed to sort of shed its heat. The shuttle has those tiles, and that's a little different system, isn't it?
It's a quite complex and integrated system. There are about 5 different types of insulators, high temperature, medium temperature, and low temperature capabilities of insulation. A breach of any of those insulators can cause immediate damage to the substrate or structure below that, and that would directly affect the margins of safety of the structure and the flight loads that are applied and what the stresses on the vehicle are. But it's important to realize that NASA has already executed a plan to look at the evidence, document the facts, bring in the laboratories and scientific equipment to do a thorough analysis to know exactly what the facts are. Speculation is the first step in being inaccurate, and we learned back in the very first days of the Challenger crash investigation that what we thought had happened with the main engines of the shuttle, the cryogenic hydrogen-oxygen engines in the rear of the orbiter, in fact were not the problem. And we also had wrong impressions about the fate of the crew as far as the crew module flight dynamics in a ballistic trajectory and whether or not the crew was alive or had an opportunity, if they had the proper equipment, to do an ejection or bailout.
What do you think, we've said this earlier and it should be pointed out, there's no ejection system on the space shuttle. That was ruled impractical and too expensive early on in the program. There is a bailout technique which the crew performs and practices frequently in the course of their training, but in this case that was not an option, was it?
You're correct, Miles. In the first early flights, 5 or 6 flights of Columbia, there were 2 ejection seats, and the flight crews were limited to 2 astronaut pilots. Those were seats that are similar to the SR-71 Blackbird ejection seats. Those were decommissioned when the shuttle was deemed operational, and currently what we have is a system that, as a NASA engineer, I had worked on at Kennedy Space Center, the barber pole bailout system, but that system is really only good for orbiter flight modes where the wings are level and the airspeed is under 200 knots, under 250 knots. And that's for blowing the side hatch off of the orbiter crew module, deploying the telescoping barber pole, and then doing a one-at-a-time sequential bailout with parachutes on their backs of the crew. But at these very high altitudes and very high Mach numbers of Mach 18 at 12,000 feet, that's not practical or even reasonable.
And the pole is there to keep them simply, the person bailing out, from striking the leading edge of the wing. We should point out to our viewers, that's why they slide down a pole. But this, as we say, not an option here. Randy, if you could just walk us through quickly, sort of in areas of, in your mind, a priority, if you were conducting this investigation, where you'd start looking first down the list of priorities.
Well, the first step is to secure the data in the centers of NASA centers around the country. That data is very important. Paperwork, digital data that could be recorded. Also to secure the crash site and to have no contamination whatsoever of that crash site. Weather could play a factor. We had the Atlantic Ocean, the salt water of the ocean and the currents, dealing with debris on the surface of the Gulf Stream headed northbound and other debris that was down on the bottom of the ocean floor. So all of this apparently being on the landmass in Texas is important to have weather conditions that are tolerable, but to do an immediate preservation of this evidence
and to collect it in a professional and accurate way. Documentation is everything, and tracking of the samples that will go to many labs for chemical and mechanical and structural analysis is extremely important.
Randy Avera, former NASA engineer, we'd like you to stay close if you could as well. We would appreciate that. We appreciate having your expertise here.
Auch in Indien, liebe Zuschauer, wurde das heutige Unglück mit großer Bestürzung und großer Aufmerksamkeit auf jeden Fall zur Kenntnis genommen. Denn eine der beiden weiblichen Astronauten an Bord der Columbia stammt aus Indien. Insgesamt, wie gesagt, es waren 2 Frauen und 5 Männer, die 7-köpfige Besatzung. Und die meisten Angehörigen dieser 5 Frauen und 5 Männer waren schon in Cape Canaveral, um ihre Angehörigen in Empfang zu nehmen. Sie haben dort auf den Monitoren die Katastrophe mitbekommen. NASA-Mitarbeiter haben sich dann gleich um diese Menschen gekümmert, haben sie an einen anderen Ort gebracht und betreuen sie dort. Sandra Schiffauer über die Besatzung der Columbia.
Diese 7 Astronauten waren am 16. Januar voller Erwartung in ihre Mission gestartet. Für viele war es das erste, für alle das letzte Mal. Der Commander Rick Husband aus Texas, 46 Jahre alt, verheiratet, 2 Kinder. Der Pilot der Raumfähre William McCool, 41 Jahre aus Kalifornien, verheiratet. David McBrown, der Raumflugspezialist aus Virginia, war 46 Jahre alt und ledig. Zweite Raumflugspezialistin an Bord, die Inderin Kalpana Chawla, 42 Jahre alt, verheiratet. Laurel Clark, die Astronautin aus Iowa, war 42 Jahre alt, verheiratet, ein Kind. Spezialist Nummer 4, Michael Anderson aus Plattsburgh im Bundesstaat New York, verheiratet. Und last but not least der einzige Israeli an Bord, Ilan Ramon aus Tel Aviv, 48 Jahre alt, 4 Kinder hinterlässt er zu Hause in Israel.
Was zu dem Unglück führte, ist zunächst noch nicht klar. Nach ersten Erkenntnissen gibt es keine Hinweise auf einen Anschlag. Die zuständigen Behörden und die NASA nahmen Ermittlungen auf.
Es geschah eine Viertelstunde vor der geplanten Landung. Der Funkkontakt zum Kontrollzentrum riss ab und die Raumfähre Columbia brach beim Eintritt in die Erdatmosphäre in 60.000 Metern Höhe in Stücke. 6 amerikanische und ein israelischer Astronaut starben. Zeugen haben einen dumpfen Knall gehört und man sah mehrere Feuerbälle. Erste Trümmerteile wurden kurz darauf in der Nähe von Fort Worth und von Dallas in Texas gefunden. Die NASA warnte die Bevölkerung, nichts zu berühren. Die Teile könnten giftige Stoffe enthalten. Die 7 Astronauten, 5 Männer und 2 Frauen, waren vor 16 Tagen zu ihrer Mission aufgebrochen. Zum ersten Mal war auch ein israelischer Raumfahrer dabei, der 48-jährige Ilan Ramon. Er sei glücklich, mitzufliegen, besonders weil er in den Monaten der Vorbereitung seine Kollegen kennen und schätzen gelernt habe. Sie seien eine großartige Crew. Der Weg zum Ziel, so sagte er, sei wichtiger als das Ziel. Und wir werden das Ziel anstreben, aber die Reise genießen. Ich bin glücklich, hier zu sein. Der Start der Columbia, des ältesten Shuttle der NASA, hatte sich wegen technischer Probleme seit Juli immer wieder verzögert. Dass dann etwas von der Raumfähre abbrach, sei laut NASA jedoch kein großes technisches Problem gewesen. Tatsächlich hatte während des 16-tägigen Aufenthalts alles reibungslos geklappt. 80 Experimente führte die Crew aus. Warum die Columbia am Ende abstürzte, ist den Experten ein Rätsel. Fieberhaft suchen sie nach Anhaltspunkten. Einen terroristischen Anschlag schließen sie jedoch aus, denn die Rakete war viel zu hoch. Niemand hätte sie vom Boden aus erreichen und auch abschießen können. Es ist ein tragischer Tag für die NASA-Familien. Für die Familien der Astronauten und für die ganze Nation. Ihr Ziel haben die 7 Männer und Frauen nie erreicht. Der Weg ins All war für sie der Weg in den Tod.
Zum letzten Stand aus Washington jetzt Tom Buro.
Die wichtigste Einschätzung der Behörden kam sehr schnell nach Bekanntwerden der Katastrophe, nämlich dass ein Terroranschlag von allen möglichen Hypothesen die unwahrscheinlichste bei der Suche nach der Ursache der Katastrophe sei. Schließlich befand sich die Raumfähre Columbia in der schwierigsten Phase ihres Landeanflugs, eine Phase, in der es alle möglichen technischen Risiken gibt. Diese Risiken auf eine mögliche Ursache des Absturzes abzuklopfen, wird die Aufgabe der NASA-Experten in den nächsten Tagen und Wochen sein. Zunächst liegt aber auch bei der NASA das Hauptaugenmerk auf den Opfern und ihren Familien. Präsident Bush war heute Morgen in Camp David auf seinem Landsitz. Er trommelte sofort alle Berater zusammen, machte sich auf den Weg zurück ins Weiße Haus. Dort stehen die Journalisten der Weltpresse bereit. Es wird erwartet, dass Bush innerhalb der nächsten Minuten im Weißen Haus eine Pressekonferenz abgibt. Und damit zunächst zurück nach Hamburg.
Mit dem Absturz der Columbia hat die NASA fast genau 17 Jahre nach der Explosion der Challenger zum zweiten Mal einen Raumtransporter verloren. Das Unglück löste weltweit Trauer und Entsetzen aus. Bundeskanzler Schröder sprach US-Präsident Bush und dem israelischen Ministerpräsidenten Sharon sein Beileid aus. Israel hatte die Reise seines Astronauten Ramon ins All noch vor kurzem als großen Schritt für das Land gefeiert.